Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Omni Hero Deku X, by Blaze Ninja Zero. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin chapter 1, and then there were Tennysons started when an alien device did what it did. Izuku looks at a metal orb with the Omnitrix before it jumps out and attaches itself to his wrist. It stuck itself upon his wrist with secrets that it hid. The Omnitrix core popped up before a silhouette of Heat Blast was shown. Now he's got superpowers. He's no ordinary kid. Izuku presses the core in as dark reddish-brown volcanic rocks crawl up his arm from the Omnitrix. He's Deku X. All 10 of Izuku's transformations are shown: Grey Matter, Rip Jaws, Diamond Head, Heat Blast, Stink Fly, Upgrade, Wild Mutt, Ghost Freak, 4 Arms, and XLR8. So if you see him, you might be in for a big surprise. Izuku, with orange fur covering his body without any eyes, who was slowly turning into Wild Mutt, started to hunch over before slamming the ground with one arm and letting out a roar. He'll turn into an alien before your very eyes. The number 1 is shown with Wild Mutt roaring before he swings his arm as the number changes to the number 2. He's slimy, creepy, fast and strong. Next to the number 2 is 4 Arms, flexes his arms before it changes to the number 3. He's every shape and size. Grey Matter numbed forward before slamming into a glass as the number changed to 4. He's Deku X. XLR8 runs onto the screen before the number changes to 5. Armed with powers, he's on the case. Upgrade is a blob number, the number 5, as it changes to 6. Fighting off evil from Earth or space. Diamond Head is standing on the number 6 before he is hit by an energy beam as the number turns to 7. He'll never stop till he makes them pay. Ripjaws is swimming next to number 7 before it changes to number 8, with Stinkfly flying above number, cause he's the baddest kid to ever save the day. Ghost Freak floats next to the number 9 before it changes to the number 10 with Heat Blast, who sends out a blast of flames before Izuku is shown punching the ground. Deku X. Gwen is shown hitting a mutant bird with a staff. Lucy turns her hands into purple mud-like hammers and slams them into drones. Deku X. Max fires 2 kinetronic blasters as Vilgax and Inko pulls out 2 energy pistols. Deku X. People in a playground. One boy stood guard over another on the floor crying. "Enough, Kraken," the boy said. He was around 4 to 5 years old with a round face framed by a short mop of fluffy dark green hair that stuck at odd angles around his head, casting noticeably dark shadows onto itself. His eyes are large and somewhat circular, their iris is the same shade of green as his hair. He has 4 symmetrical freckles in diamond formations, 1 on each cheek. He was dressed in a jungle green shirt with short sleeves, green shorts and a pair of red high tops with white soles and black laces. His name is Izuku Midoriya. The person crying on the floor was a fair-skinned girl with a slender, narrow-shouldered build. She had triangular, lazy-looking onyx eyes with notably long lower eyelashes and rather small eyebrows. Her hair is short, around chin length, and dark purple in color with an asymmetrical fringe and 2 reflections shaped like a heartbeat monitor waves on either side of her head. Her most prominent features are the flexible, plug-like earphone jacks hanging from each of her earlobes at the end of 2 thin cords. She wore a violet and black striped shirt, brown shorts, and purple sneakers. Her name is Kyoka Jiro. "You already made her cry," Izuku said as he started to shake, looking across from a boy with blonde spiked hair and red eyes. "Stop it," he told them as he moved his hands up in a boxing-like stance. The blonde spiked boy wore a black shirt with a cartoonish white skull, dark brown shorts, and black sandals. His name is Katsuki Bakugo. But he did not waver. "Are not all born equal, so Deku, the quirkless wonder," Bakugo said as explosions started to pop in his hands as he walked forward with 2 people behind him. Name, Katsuki Bakugo. Species, human quirk, explosion. Bakugo can make his sweat explode when he wants to. The first was a large boy with a rounded face and brown hair that was almost completely shaved, and due to his quirk, 2 red and draconic wings emerged from his back. His name is Tsubasa Garaki. Tsubasa's wings gave a mighty flap, took to the air, and started to fly forward. Name, Tsubasa Garaki. Species, human quirk, dragon-like wings. Tsubasa can fly with red dragon-like wings. And the second one was a boy with short brown hair, a red cap that was on backward, a yellow button-up shirt with a navy undershirt, dark gray shorts and blue sneakers. His name is Tadatoshi Hara. Tadatoshi's fingers started to grow incredibly long as he walked forward up to Izuku. Name, Tadatoshi Hara. Species, human quirk, extending fingers. Tadatoshi can extend his fingers up to 9 times the length of his arm. And he thinks that he can play hero, Bakugo said as an explosion went off in his hand as he joined the 2 others walking over to Izuku. Izuku saw Kyoka flinch when the explosion went off, so he turned to her. Run, Izuku told her as she looked up at him. I'll keep them distracted, Izuku added with a scared smile. Name, Izuku Midoriya. Species, human quirk, quirkless. Izuku does not have a quirk. Kyoka looked shocked at Izuku when he heard Bakugo say that Izuku was quirkless, but still stood up for her and defended her. She nodded and ran off, but Izuku's face stayed in her mind for some reason. And that's the hard truth I learned at the age of 4. Tadatoshi extends his fingers out and ensures he holds Izuku down as Bakugo punches Izuku with an explosion. 4.5 years later, USA, Bellwood Airport. Izuku got off a plane dressed in a black striped, jungle green shirt with short sleeves, military green cargo pants and a pair of red high tops with white soles and black laces. He then walked over to the baggage carousel, grabbed a green metal suitcase, and started to walk out of the central part of the airport before he spotted someone. The person that Izuku found was a slightly overweight man with gray hair in his late 50s or early 60s. He wore a white shirt covered by a red buttoned-up Hawaiian shirt with a floral design, blue pants, and brown shoes. This was Max Tennyson. Hey, kiddo, Max said as he greeted Izuku. How was your flight? He asked Izuku. It was good as I was making notes on something that could help me be a hero, Izuku said. Max raised a brow with a smile. Oh really? Max asked as Izuku nodded as they walked up to an RV. The RV was beige with 2 stripes wrapped around it, one red and the other blue, and Max called it the Rust Bucket. Let's go get your cousins, Max said as they walked into the RV. The 2 drove off into a small city and started to make their way to the suburban part of Bellwood. So where are we going, Grandpa? Izuku asked Max. Max gained a small slime as he looked at Izuku out of the corner of his eye. A road trip around America, he told the young boy. Max drove up to a house as 2 children of the same age as Izuku walked out. And they both were girls. The first had green eyes and short red hair held by a blue hair clip and wore sapphire earrings, an elbow-length blue raglan shirt with a cat logo, white capri pants, and white sneakers with dark blue stripes without socks. Her name is Gwen Tennyson. The other had long, blonde hair, blue eyes, and 2 distinct whisker marks on either side of her face. She was dressed in a black sleeveless shirt with a star on it, a red skirt, white sneakers with dark red stripes, and white socks. And her name is Lucy Man. Izuku saw them before running out and hugging them, and they did the same to him. How are you, cuz? Lucy asked as Gwen looked at Izuku, her eyes gaining a light purple glow. I'm doing good, Izuku told Lucy with a smile. And while her outer look did not change, she hated what she saw. Izuku had an aura of green, yellow, and pink with a red pinprick covering him. Name, Gwendolyn Tennyson. Species, human quirk, emotional look. Gwen looks at someone, and she can see their emotions with an aura, and the color of the aura depends on the emotion: red anger, green happy, pink love, yellow depressed. Before Gwen could talk to Izuku, Max walked over to his grandchildren with a smile representing his stature in their lives. Are you 2 ready? He asked them. Lucy nodded at him and pointed at the rust bucket, and Max turned to see 2 golems of earth moving 2 suitcases over to the rust bucket, with one being sky blue with a dark blue cat and the other was red with a white star. Name, Lucy Man. Species, human quirk, golem. Lucy can mold the earth beneath her feet. Max smiled down at his granddaughter. You 3 head in. I just have to talk with these 4, he told his grandchildren. The 3 nodded at him as they walked into the rust bucket as Max walked up to Gwen and Lucy's parents. Hello, you 4, Max said to them, but looked at Lucy's mother. How long until Lucy awakens her powers? He asked her. She looked at him. Soon, she told him. Max nodded before nodding at them before he walked into the rust bucket. Out in space, near the rings of Saturn within the deep vacuum of space, two spaceships were flying, though the vacuum of space is space. The first is primarily horizontal, with a ring surrounding the back of the ship, seemingly acting both as thrusters and landing gear that is a navy blue, with some components being green. The second one is a larger ship, which is primarily brown ship with orange egg-like constructs all around, used to accent the body, and some used as portholes with the ship resembling an earth taser, with two long extended pieces constantly generating orange electricity between them with the back end has a red energy propulsion system and had turrets and antennae over the ship. Two red beams were fired from the larger of the two ships at the smaller ship before the Navy ship sent two small green beams at the larger ship. On the bigger ship humanoid droids were on a console as it read the information on it, most of their bodies were black with orange over the chests and upper arms. Hull damage 20%, a droid said as it approached a screen, weapon system still operational, the droid added as it turned around. The one the droid was talking to was a humanoid creature with a face resembling that of an octopus. They had tentacles dangling in the front of his face, like a beard with skin is a pale green with yellowish spots on his face and tentacles, no a nose and a visible ears and red eyes. They wore a black and red brownish armored suit and gloves. With the armor, it had spikes at the shoulder and arm pads, and he also had green sacks on the sides of his head. This was Vilgax. I have come too far to be denied, Vilgax told the droid as he looked at a screen that showed the other ship, the Omnitrix shall be mine, and there is not a being in the galaxy that dares stand in my way, Vilgax said as the droid nodded as it turned back to the console and pressed some buttons and the ship fired another beam that hit the other ship's engine. Their propulsion systems have been destroyed, a droid told Vilgax, who turned to another droid. Prepare to board, Vilgax told it as the droid nodded. I want the Omnitrix now, Vilgax said as he leant forward. On the Navy ship aboard the ship was a female reptilian humanoid with mint green skin, two tentacles on her head and one on her lower back. She had 4 long fingers and ankles bent inward, with her feet having 3 claw-like toes, 2 pointing forwards and 1 pointing backwards. As clothing, she wore a tight blue sleeveless jumpsuit. Her name is Xylene. She was at the control room of her ship with warning lights and sounds going off as she looked at a screen that showed the larger ship before looking at another screen. The screen showed a dark gray metallic pod. Xylene pressed some buttons as it was loaded into something before she pressed some more buttons and started to run to an escape pod. Space Xylene's ship shot another beam that hit the main deck of Vilgax's ship, and the larger ship fired a larger blast that completely obliterated most of the smaller ship, but it still fired 2 pods that started to head to Earth. Planet Earth, USA, California, Yosemite. Izuku, Lucy and Gwen sat on a wooden bench as Max started carrying a bowl of worms out of the rust bucket. Chow time, Max told his grandchildren. Okay, I give up. What is that? Lucy asked as she looked at the bowl of worms. Marinated mealworms, Max told his grandchildren with a large smile on his face. Hard to find them in the States. You know they are considered a delicacy in some countries, he added for them. And totally gross in others, Gwen said as she watched Izuku pick up one of the worms. So how are they, Izuku? Max asked his grandson. Izuku gave a shaky smile as he could feel the worm trying to come back up. Sorry, Grandpa, I'm not a fan, Izuku said weakly. That's alright, Max said as he smiled at Izuku. I've got some smoked sheep's tongue in the fridge, Max told them. Lucy looked at Izuku and Gwen, and seeing that Izuku was turning as green as his hair, she turned to Max. Couldn't we just have a burger or something? Lucy asked him as both Izuku and Gwen nodded. Max shook his head at them. Nonsense, this summer's gonna be an adventure for your taste buds. I'll grab the tongue, he told them as he walked back into the rust bucket. Seeing that Max was out of range of talking, Lucy looked at Izuku and Gwen. Alight, I've got a half-eaten of corn chips and a candy bar. What you got? Lucy asked them. I've got some instant ramen and small sweets, Izuku said as Lucy nodded before they both turned to Gwen. I got some rice cakes and hard candy, she told them as they nodded. Lucy looked between both her cousins. Do you think we can make them last the whole summer? She asked them. But all three knew they could not make them last that long, so they looked into the RV in dread. After a horrifying lunch after lunch, Max had cooked up for them. Gwen started reading a book, Izuku was writing in his notebook, and Lucy was playing with a Nintendo SWCH. "Who wants to roast marshmallows?" Max asked them as he walked out of the rust bucket. Izuku looked up and nodded. "I'll go get some firewood," he said as Max smiled at his grandson and nodded at him. Izuku started to head into the forest. Looking around for sticks, he started to collect them before he heard something above him. He looked up to see something flying across the sky. It looked like a shooting star. "Wow, a shooting star," Izuku said, amazed as he looked at it. And the shooting star did something both amazing and terrifying. It turned in the air. The shooting star started to head for Izuku, and the green-headed boy started to run away before the shooting star impacted the ground with such force that Izuku was forced off his feet as he looked at the crater that it left. Izuku slowly got up and crept forward to inspect the crater. "What is it, a satellite or something?" Izuku asked himself as he looked at a round metal sphere that looked like a roly-poly before the ground beneath his feet gave way, and he stared to slide down to it. It then opened, and Izuku saw one thing that would change his life from that day onward. Inside it was a large black and gray wristwatch, with a black dial in the middle like a watch face with a green hourglass shape on it. "A watch?" Izuku asked himself as he looked at it, "and what is it doing in outer space?" he added before doing one thing that would forever change his life forever. He reached out for it. And it jumped out of the container that it was in and onto his wrist. He jumped back, freaked out at what just happened, and started to wave his hand back and forth to try and get the watch off him. Try being the keyword. Freaked out, he booked it out of the crater and started to run back to the rust bucket before he found a stick on the ground and tried to use it to get the watch off him. But it would not budge. Having calmed down, be it only a tiny part, Izuku examined the watch before he pressed the button on it. The dial popped up on a circular tube with a green circuitry pattern around it. The hourglass symbol changed to that of a diamond that showed a silhouette of a man with a fiery head. Izuku looked at it in amazement before placing his finger on the dial before he pressed the dial in. And for the first time, he transformed. The watch started to grow out dark reddish-brown rocks that started to cover his before it was covered, and the rocks moved up his arm and under his shirt and up his head before it encircled his head and the rest of his body as the symbol of the watch forms on his chest as in between the rocks as yellow flames burst into being around his hands and the hair on his head but. "Aya!" Izuku yelled out as he looked at his hands. Izuku looked at his body in shock, and his mind was going a mile a minute. He started to run around screaming, I'm on fire," he yelled as he ran around. After a while, he stopped and looked at his hands. "I'm on fire, but I'm okay," he said as he started to take in what his body was now like. His body was now a plasma-based lifeform composed of a super-hot inner plasma body covered by dark reddish-brown volcanic rocks with small but noticeable cracks around him, much like other minerals. Izuku looked down at his feet to see that they had a slight oval-like design with only 2 toes and 1 back toe. He stuck out his tongue, and from what he could see, it was also made of fire. While he felt his collarbone, he thought that it resembled a volcano, which generated a fiery hair that covered his head, leaving his mask-like face visible with no nose or ears. "So it looked like I transformed," he said quietly as he examined his hands and saw that they were bigger than his normal hands, now had 3 fingers and a thumb. "How did I transform? Is it a quirk? No, I think it was thwachbuth how did it do theta sit because I came from space so am I aminster somathan gels like Yanalian, the watch but how did it do that is it because it came from space, so am I a monster or something else like an alien," Izuku started saying before he began to speak so fast that the words started to merge together and he started to mutter. Izuku then saw a tree branch, and he pointed the finger at the branch and shot a fireball out of the finger. The fireball flew through the air and blasted the branch off the tree before he started to look at his hand, thinking before shaking his head, "I'll start a forest fire if I do anything else here, and maybe Grandpa might know what to do," Izuku thought as he stared to make his way back. He also picked up sticks on his way back. Back at the rust bucket Max, Gwen, and Lucy were sitting around a small fire pit waiting for Izuku to come back, and both Gwen and Lucy were doing what they were doing when Izuku left. "So while we're waiting for your cousin, tell me how his school has been for the both of you, Max asked his granddaughters. Gwen looked up from her book at her grandfather. Well, I've started to learn karate from when I last saw you, she told him. Oh really, Max asked her as Gwen nodded, and as I have not seen you since the start of last year, can you tell me what belt you are, he asked her. I'm a blue belt, Gwen told him. Max smiled at her with a nod. Well done, he told her before he turned to Lucy. What about you, Lucy? Max asked her. I've been learning how to make pottery, Lucy said as she saw something walking towards them. It was Izuku. But here was the thing. He was still that volcanic rock humanoid and still carrying sticks that seemingly had not caught fire. Lucy gained a look of shock as both Gwen and Max looked over as Max kept a straight face but thought, what's a pyronite doing on Earth? He then looked at the chest and saw the symbol on it, and why does it have that symbol, he mentally added. Hey, Grandpa, Izuku called out as he walked up as Gwen and Lucy looked at him in confusion. Lucy and Gwen looked at each other, confused, before they looked back at Izuku. Who are you? Lucy asked as she reached for a fire extinguisher. It's me, Izuku, he told them as he pet his head to the side. Max's eyes widened slightly at that. Did he really make that? Max thought as he looked at Izuku. Lucy and Gwen narrowed their eyes at him. Prove it, Gwen said. How? Izuku asked them. Gwen struggled to find an answer. What's Izuku's and our favorite animals? Gwen asked him as Lucy looked at Gwen with a deadpan face. Really? Lucy asked her. Gwen looked back at the blonde. It's all I could come up with, she told her. Izuku nodded at Gwen. Well, mine are lions, as I want to be as mighty as one, rabbits, as Mom always calls me her little rabbit, and sheep, as when Aunt Fubuki said that my hair reminded of a sheep, Izuku said as Gwen looked shocked by the answers. Yours, Gwen, is a cat, as you like how flexible they are, and Lucis are moles because they burrow thou the grown, Izuku added. They were shocked at the correct answer as they looked at Izuku. Izuku, how did you? Gwen asked as she looked at him. Izuku walked over to them and put the sticks that he collected into the fire pit, and held his hand over it as the sticks caught fire. Well, when I was getting wood for the fire, something fell out of the sky. I thought it was a meteor at first, then when I saw it I thought a satellite, but I was proved wrong and found out that it was a container, Izuku told them as he sat down on a stone. Inside was this funky-looking watch that jumped onto my wrist, and after a bit of freaking out I calmed down and after failed to get the watch off, I pressed a button and then I think its core popped up, and a silhouette of this guy was on the dial on the screen before I pressed the core in and turned into this, Izuku told them. The three took the information in as they started to eat marshmallows, with Gwen throwing some over to Izuku. Do you think that it's a quirk that you awakened? Lucy asked him, but Izuku shook his head. No, as thou Mom, our aunts and grandpa, even though he's quirkless, our parents and aunts have telekinetic curics, Izuku said as both Gwen and Lucy nodded. Name, Maxwell, Max, Tennyson species, human quirk, quirkless, Max does not have a quirk. That's true, as my mother had a telekinetic curic, Max said as the girls and Izuku nodded. And my dad had fire breath, but Itachijiji could use some fire but had an avatar of energy. Susanoo and his brother had the same, but with lighting instead of fire, and he gets his fire breath through his father Fugaku and his Susanoo from his mother Mikoto, Izuku said as Max nodded, and I think that the watch turned me into Heat Blast, Izuku told them. Heat Blast? Gwen asked him. Yeah, I named this form Heat Blast, Izuku told her as he turned his grandfather. So what am I? Izuku asked him. Max looked shocked at the question. Why are you asking me? He asked his grandson while he was freaking out on the inside. Well, I once overheard Tatsumaki Oba saying that you have seen a lot, so I thought that you might know, Izuku told him. Yeah, and will Izuku say a monster forever? Lucy asked Max, who looked between his grandchildren, and he failed to see Gwen's eyes turn light purple. And she saw the aura around her grandfather turn from the normal blue, calm, and start to turn orange and purple, surprise and guilt, as this went on. What is he hiding? Gwen asked herself. He's not a monster, Max said as all three of them looked at him. He's an alien, he added with a serious tone. Max's eyes widened slightly, and Gwen turned to him before he could open his mouth again. What are you hiding, Grandpa? She asked him as Max turned to her and saw her eyes. He then looked at Izuku and Lucy, and all three looked shocked at his answer. And he could see both sadness and distrust in their eyes. And it was aimed at him. He then sighed, "It's happening again, and now it's their turn to feel the distrust," Max thought before standing up. "Let me get something, and I'll explain," he told them. The three watched as Max walked into the rust bucket, reached into a cabinet, and pulled something out before he walked back out. When he returned and walked over to them, they saw he was holding a handheld metal disc-like object with a glass-like center. "Izuku can put the fire out," Max asked his grandson, who nodded and held out his hand as the flames of the fire were sucked into his hand, and when Izuku pulled his arm back, he looked at his hand in wonder. "From what I was told, the Omnitrix, it downloads the instincts of the alien you turn into to your brain for you to get a better understanding of the speeches that you turn into," Max told him as they turned to him. "Omnitrix?" Lucy asked him. Max said nothing as he placed the disc on the ground as a large hologram of a sizable futuristic base. "This is a plumber's base," Max said as they all looked at him confused. The plumbers were created during the 1750s with the founding fathers, and they were made to fix leaks in normal society, and that how it was until I joined them, Max told them. The hologram changed to a younger man that looked like him. "Is that you, Grandpa?" Izuku asked him. The older man nodded. "Yep, that is me when I was 20, and I met my first two aliens when I was defending one from something called a synthroid," Max said as the hologram changed to a tall black humanoid robot. "And the two aliens I met, the first was Labrid." The hologram changed to a tall, fish-like humanoid with mauve-colored skin and yellow eyes with black, slit-like pupils. His neck is covered with long black gills on either side, and they were dressed in white armor with a what looked to be a glass bowl connected to the armor. "And your grandmother Verdona," Max said as the hologram changed once more. It was a humanoid with a dark purple body and a human-like head and face, and out of its head was a bright pink energy tentacle. "And they appear to be wearing no clothes." "What is she?" Lucy asked as she and Izuku looked at the picture of their grandmother. "Your grandmother is known as an anodite, a being that is made up of pure energy," Max told them. "Before, I was in the Air Force at the time, and then I was asked by Labrid to join him in the intergalactic police that he was a part of, and at the same time I met someone called Edward White, and he wanted me to join the plumbers, and I decided to join both. And then not long after that both the plumbers and intergalactic police merged together, and they used the name plumbers," Max added to them. The symbol on Izuku's chest started to flash red, and then he was engulfed by a bright red light and was back to being human. Max narrowed his eyes at the watch that was on Izuku's wrist. And it was glowing red. "So that's the Omnitrix," he said as Gwen looked where her grandfather was looking. "The watch is called the Omnitrix?" Gwen asked him as Max nodded. "Yep," Max said before he looked off into the forest. As he picked up the disc that he had put on the ground, "You three stay here, I'll go look at the pod, and I'll tell you more when I get back," he told them. He stopped just short of the forest. "Lucy, can I have some of your golems?" Max asked the blonde as she nodded. Two golems of earth formed out of the ground and followed Max as he walked into the forest and followed Izuku's scorched footprints. "In space, on Vilgax's ship." "What do you mean it's not there?" Vilgax asked with a growl as he was now in a chamber filled with an orange liquid connected with most of his body missing. He lost his right arm and leg, the lower part of his left leg and portions of his left arm. "This battle nearly cost me my life," he told a droid with a raspy voice. "And you say that the Omnitrix is no longer on the transport?" he asked the droid. "Sensors indicate a probe was jettisoned from the ship just before boarding," the droid told the squid alien. "It landed on the planet below," it added. Vilgax narrowed his eyes. "Send an attack Mechadroid to get he told the droid. In space, the cargo door of Vilgax's ship opened before a large pod was dropped out of the ship that was heading to where the Omnitrix landed. It flew through the atmosphere. It then burst through the sky and then into the forest. When it landed, it started to extend 3 legs, one from the back and one from each side, 2 arms popped out, 4-fingered claws popped out, and then his head. The robot looked around but found nothing before the 2 discs that were on his shoulders popped out and started to fly away. They unfold into UFO-shaped like robots with 5 blade-like legs and a frontal laser cannon. Back at the rust bucket, Max and the golems returned to camp with the metal container as Izuku, Gwen, and Lucy walked over to it. "Is that what held the Omnitrix?" Gwen asked Izuku, who nodded. Lucy had the golems place the circular container on the ground as Max started to examine it. "This is a Galvan containment capsule," Max said as he looked over it. "Galvan?" Gwen asked him. "They are one of the most intelligent species in the universe, and they are sometimes matched by the cerebrocrustaceans," Max said as they heard a sound from Izuku, who looked down at the Omnitrix. And it looked like the red had turned green. Max looked over to Izuku. "The Omnitrix will help him be a hero, and I can use that to help him," he thought before his eyes turned to Gwen and Lucy, "and I have a feeling that those two can and will want to help him," he added, and after thinking on it for a while before he nodding. "Izuku, I have an idea on how you can be a hero," Max said to his grandson with a serious face, "but I have to ask, do you want all the responsibilities that come with being one?" he asked. "Responsibilities?" Lucy asked him. "Yes, all heroes have 3 essential duties. The first is to rescue those in danger, the second is to evacuate those that need medical aid, and the third is to battle the villain," Izuku said as Max nodded, and both Lucy and Gwen turned to their cousin. "Also, when a crisis occurs, the police will contact various hero agencies or heroes that are in the same area as the crisis. Then after the chaos is settled, the heroes will file a report about the work they did, saving people and capturing criminals," he added as Max looked amazed by the information that Izuku had. But he was not done. "The reports are then sent to a special agency that will review their work and determine how much they should be paid," he added as Lucy and Gwen took in what Izuku was telling them, "and when a hero is on patrol, the agency's owner hero will lead the patrol themselves, and these patrols are meant to dissuade villains from committing crimes and to show civilians that the heroes are there to protect them." Izuku finished speaking after taking a deep breath. Max smiled as he walked over to Izuku. "It seems that you know what you have to do when you get there, and I think you can use the Omnitrix to help you," Max told him as he placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, "and I have a way to train you so that you don't get in trouble with the law," he added as Gwen looked confused. "How is that, Grandpa?" she asked him as Lucy nodded. "I get that both you and Izuku don't have quirks like Gwen and me," Lucy said as she pointed at Gwen and herself, "but how can you train Izuku?" she asked him. "That's easy, as there are 3 things you need to know," Max told her as his smile got wider. "First, you don't need a quirk to be a hero. Second, I can train Izuku how to best use the Omnitrix, and third, I can give him the training that I went through in the Air Force, the training that I needed to be an astronaut and the training I got to be a plumber," he added as Lucy looked shocked. Seeing that Lucy had nothing, Izuku pressed the button on the Omnitrix as the core popped up with the silhouette of Heat Blast before he turned the dial as the silhouette changed. The first looked like a bug, then something that looked like a dinosaur, then a dog. Before he could press the core back in, Gwen spoke up. "So what was it like when you became Heat Blast?" she asked him. "I was freaked out at first," Izuku said as Lucy sat down with both Gwen and Izuku. "It felt like it was me, but at the same time, it was like I was someone else," he added. Lucy smiled at Izuku and raised her arm. "Well, let's get this show on the road," she called out as she pressed the core down for Izuku. The Omnitrix dug itself into Izuku's arm as orange fur grew over his body, and his eyes fused shut. Izuku's body was hunched over, becoming more canine as his lips became black and yellowish, and black claw-like nails came out of his now 4-fingered hand. Around his neck, a dark teal and black collar with the Omnitrix symbol formed, and gills opened on his neck before he let out a roar. Izuku stood there in his new form as Gwen and Lucy looked over him. "What is he now?" Lucy asked Max. Max looked at Izuku. "He is a Volpomancer, the greatest tracker in the known universe, but they cannot see or speak," Max said as Izuku groaned. Lucy gained a mischievous look in her eyes as she called up a golem from behind Izuku. Izuku's gills opened, and he saw something coming behind him and jumped up and onto the rust bucket. "How did he do that?" Lucy asked as the golem that she called out crumbled away. Volpomancers, while they can't see, have enhanced hearing and their excellent sense of smell. They have what we believe to be a 3D vision around them, Max told them as Izuku jumped back down to them. Izuku then looked off and started to growl as Max looked in the same direction as Izuku and narrowed his eyes as he saw a slight red glow within the forest. And then soon, a robot with a round body, 5 blade-like legs, and a blaster in the front. Mechadroids, Max said as he turned to Izuku, who was growling at it. Take it out, he told his grandson. Izuku gave the nod as he jumped at Mechadroid and landed on it. It flew into the forest as another flew out of the forest. The second Mechadroid zoned in on Max before rolling out of the way as the blaster part of the Mechadroid glowed red and shot at the ground in front of him. With Izuku and Mechadroid flew through the forest, and the Mechadroid tried to shake Izuku off it as it moved its blaster arm to shoot Izuku. Izuku, seeing this, moved his head and bit down on the arm before ripping it off. The Mechadroid tried to get Izuku off it by ramming into trees. But Izuku held on strong. He then guided the Mechadroid as it flew through the trees and brake them in half before Izuku gripped the head of the Mechadroid and tore it off before jumping off of it as the Mechadroid flew into a mountain. Izuku then started running on all fours back to the rust bucket, and when he burst through the trees and made it back to his family, he found that the Mechadroid was defeated already as Max was standing over it with 2 blasters in his hands. Izuku could not see that it was Same buried in the earth. Max turned to Izuku. Did you take it out? He asked his grandson, and Izuku nodded. Good, me and your cousins took out the other one, he informed him. The Omnitrix started flashing as Izuku returned to normal. I don't like this, Max said as his grandchildren walked over. What is it, Grandpa? Lucy asked him. Max looked at the 3 of them before he sighed. Yes, ago, when I was still on active duty as a plumber, my partner and I were on this case to get someone. He told the 3 of them as they nodded. His name was Vilgax and I stopped him from trying to enslave Earth, and I was the only person to do that from I was told, Max told them as grandchildren amazed at him. Are you telling us that this is Vilgax? Izuku asked him as Max nodded before a noise filled the air. Mayday, mayday, somebody help us. The 4 turned to the rust bucket as they walked over to see that the radio was going off. We're under attack by some kind of robot. The person on the overside of the radio sounded afraid. It sounds like the drones that were after the Omnitrix, Gwen said as Max nodded. That's Vilgax for you, Max said before turning to Izuku. Are you ready to start your journey to become a hero? He asked his grandson, who nodded. I'm ready, Izuku told him as Gwen and Lucy nodded as well. You ain't going to do this on your own, Lucy told him, and Max and Izuku turned to her. You have both her and me, Gwen added as all 3 turned to their grandfather, who smiled at them. Before they could say anything, an explosion was heard from somewhere deep in the forest. Izuku narrowed his eyes as he used his ears as the explosion sound had come from. And if he listened carefully, he could hear stomping and the sound of metal being crushed. I think that it's at the other campsite, Izuku said. Max nodded as he walked around the RV, and took out 2 flashlights before handing one to Gwen. The 4 of them started going to where they heard another explosion. The 4 of them started running towards where the explosion was as Max looked at his grandchildren, and his mind drifted to his days with his children as they grew up. But he knew that this time, it would be different. After a few minutes, they reached the campsite as the Omnitrix had recharged and turned from red to green. Before they could do anything, another explosion drew their attention. They saw a larger robot walking around, destroying the campsite. It was roughly 40 feet tall with more humanoid features than the other drones and 3 long insectoid legs. It had 2 arms with large claws, with 4 fingers per claw on the end of each arm. It's an attack Mechadroid, Max said as he looked up at the robot. 3 of America's heroes arrived on the scene. The first was a woman in a black skin tight, resembling a motorcycle suit with fluorescent white lines around her body and a visor over her eyes. The next was a man with a leather jacket, dark blue ripped jeans, high-top boots, and a guitar shaped like a lightning bolt. The third one was also female and wore a leg and armless leotard with high-heeled boots and a mask over the mouth, and all of her clothes were light pink. Who are they? Lucy asked as they watched the heroes fight the robot. There, the American number 97th hero, Lady Light, Izuku said as the woman with the fluorescent white lines formed 2 swords of light in her hands. Name, Dawn Petal Hero Name, Lady Light Hero Ranking, 97 Species, Human Quirk, Light Make, Lady Light can form light constructs in her hands. Oh, right, I heard of her, she's the one who brightened the E-rank villain Captain Hook, Gwen said as they watched as the attack Mechadroid slapped Lady Light out of its way as she went into an RV. The man with the guitar started to play as rain started to pour down and the fires around the campsite began to be put out. Oh, that's the 109th hero, the rocker hero, Sunny Day, Lucy said as the fires were put out. Sunny Day then turned to attack Mechadroid, and he started to play a fast-paced song. Name: Ashton Moss Hero Name, Rocker Hero, Sunny Day Hero Ranking, 109 Species, Human Quirk, Musical Weather. Sunny Day uses the music that he plays on any instrument to change the weather around him. Yeah, I heard that he took down the B-rank villain Lady Deathstrike, Izuku said as his family nodded. Attack Mechadroid fired a laser at Sunny Day, but the laser was hit by another laser that turned to dust that washed over the hero. And that is the 117th hero, Ninja Lady, Lucy said as she rolled her eyes, and she is the new girl on the hero scene, she told her Japanese cousin. Name: Harmony Wood Hero Name, Ninja Lady Number, 117 Species, Human Quirk, Illusion Transformation. Ninja Lady can turn something real into an illusion for 5 hours before returning to normal. Oh, I heard that the newest hero in California, Izuku said as they saw send out a pink beam that met the red beams of the attack Mechadroid as a bolt of lightning was shot from the sky thanks to Sunny Day. But Ninja Lady made a mistake. She turned the lightning bolt into an illusion of water that splashed over the attack Mechadroid. Sunny Day turned to Ninja Lady. What the hell was that? He yelled at her. I panicked, she yelled back before the attack Mechadroid swung its arms, beating the two of them away, and Sunny Day's guitar was broken. Izuku then looked up at Max, who nodded to him, so Izuku pressed the button on the side, the core popped up, and a silhouette of a ghost-like creature was within the diamond on the dial. Next was a bug, and then the next one was a humanoid with spikes on his shoulders. Izuku then pressed the core in as a green flash covered his body. Greenish-blue crystals started to grow from Izuku's arm, over his body, up his arm, and around his head before turning into a point at the back of his head. More crystals formed over his eyes, the same shade of green as Izuku's. Izuku's clothes changed to dark teal pants with red boots as 4 crystal shards pushed out of his back, the top 2 being out of his shoulder blades. As the transformation was finished, the Omnitrix symbol formed on his chest. Both Gwen and Lucy looked up at Izuku as they looked at the crystal alien that their cousin. So what can this one do? Gwen asked them. He's a Petrosapien right now, Max said as he looked up at his grandson, and from what I know, they have complete control of their bodies and have Christokinesis, Max said as Izuku nodded. I'll take it down, you guys get the campers to safety, Izuku told his family as he looked up at the Mechadroid. The Mechadroid started to reach for a man on the ground before shards of greenish-blue crystals hit its arm and turned to Izuku, who was looking at it. Hey, I'll be dealing with you, he told the robot as the attack Mechadroid's eyes flashed and scanned Izuku before locking on the Omnitrix. Around the campsite, golems started to form areas and help move people out of the camp as Lucy formed them with Gwen pointing at places before more golems were created as they went and helped people. Back with Izuku, he formed a shield on one arm as it reflected a laser back at the Mechadroid and hit the arm, blowing some of the shoulders off. Seeing that its lasers were doing nothing against the Petrosapien, it jumped into the air as its legs started to spin at an incredible speed to gain altitude before it slammed into the ground as Izuku formed a barrier of crystals ahead of him, stopping a shockwave from hitting him. It's hurt by its own laser, Izuku thought as he looked down at his hands and gained an idea. The Mechadroid started to punch the crystal barrier, but Izuku moved the crystals, and it pierced through the hand of the Mechadroid, holding it in place. Izuku then shot out 2 steams of crystal from his feet and landed on the barrier. Is that the best you can do? Izuku asked it as it looked down at the transformed boy and got ready to fire a laser at Izuku. The campsite was cleared of people as the heroes woke up looking shocked. Who is he? Ninja Lady asked her fellow heroes. I don't know, Sunny Day said as Max approached them and pulled out a badge. He is my grandson, whom I have given permission to use the support gear to train to be a hero to take down that robot. Max said as the heroes looked at the badge and were shocked to see that he was both a former Air Force and an astronaut. But you need a hero or police permission to do so, Lady Light said as Moss shook his head and handed over a law book to her. Page 19, Rule 12, Subsection 6, Max said as Lady Light opened the book into the page and found the law in question. It states that, members or those that have retired from the armed forces of the world can allow use of quirk or support item in case of emergency with the badge of G, W, H as I have here, Max told Lady Light, who looked shocked and handed the book back to Max. Thank you Lady Light, Max told her as they all turned back to Izuku and the Mechadroid. The Mechadroid raised its arm to get ready to fire a laser at Izuku, who held out his hands, as the laser bet the hand, and Izuku started to send it back as it cut through the Mechadroid. As the Mechadroid fell to the ground and exploded, Max walked over to Izuku as Gwen and Lucy joined them and they walked back to the rust bucket. In space, on Vilgax's ship, Vilgax watched the battle over a holographic screen as small crab drones walked over him and started to stitch his body back together. Failure, unbelievable, Vilgax rasped with a weak voice, the puny earth being that is keeping the Omnitrix from me shall soon hang on my trophy wall, Vilgax said as he watched the battle over again. The next day, early in the morning, at the rust bucket, Max and his grandchildren were putting the equipment away as Lucy looked bored out of her mind. Izuku, can't you change and put these away, she asked him. And not let you do anything, Izuku asked her as Gwen and Max gave a laugh to that. And when we're in DC next, I'll need to hit up a plumber base to get some equipment so that I can train you guys in them, Max told the three of them as they nodded and continued to put away the equipment. Deep in space, as the camera moved past the clouds to the rust bucket diving. Kimi to Diata no Watada no Gyuzan Janae Kore wa Unmiai to Yabunda on the rust bucket, Gwen and Lucy are playing cards with each other while Izuku is writing in his notebook. Sono Hitomi ni Atsuru Bokutachi ga Kagiite Raruri Uni Zudo Mitsum Suzuki. Max looked back in the rearview mirror at his grandchildren as a plane flew overhead. Please be Dakra Moshi Kono Mun Ga with me Michi ni Mayo Hai ni wa Mirai Hino Tobira wa Hirite Hoshiai. As the rust bucket passes, an overhead billboard shows all 10 of Izuku's transformations, dancing with Izuku in front of leading the forms. Ready for the takeoff Michi Neru Sekai Hitamai Agarunda Dakara Sono Te Hanasanade Buddy ready for the takeoff Yum Ga Mazasu Basho Hitsukanda Kono Kazuna Nijirai Shimite. They pass another overhead billboard that shows, this time, the other members of the Tennyson and Midoriya families dancing and billboards of moments of each of Izuku's aliens. Like Heat Blast fighting an army of drones, Wild Mutt jumping from tree to tree, Diamond Head firing shards at targets, XLR-8. Running over water, Grey Matter building someone on the table of the rust bucket, For Arms fighting a mammoth, Stinkfly fighting a mutant bird, Ripjaws fighting a man underwater, Upgreet shooting an optical laser and Ghost Freak searing Zomboso. Ready for the takeoff Yum Ga Mazasu Basho Hite Ni Shita Kono Kazuna Nijirai Shimite. The rust bucket stops at a large field as the four leave the rust bucket and look up to the sky. Chapter 2, Washington B.C. It started when an alien device did what it did. Izuku looks at a metal orb with the Omnitrix before it jumps out and attaches itself to his wrist. It stuck itself upon his wrist with secrets that it hid. The Omnitrix core popped up before a silhouette of Heat Blast was shown. Now he's got superpowers. He's no ordinary kid. Izuku presses the core in as dark reddish-brown volcanic rocks crawl up his arm from the Omnitrix. He's Deku X. All 10 of Izuku's transformations are shown: Grey Matter, Ripjaws, Diamond Head, Heat Blast, Stinkfly, Upgrade, Wild Mutt, Ghost Freak, 4 Arms, and XLR-8. So if you see him, you might be in for a big surprise. Izuku, with orange fur covering his body without any eyes, who was slowly turning into Wild Mutt, started to hunch over before slamming the ground with one arm and letting out a roar. He'll turn into an alien before your very eyes. The number 1 is shown with Wild Mutt roaring before he swings his arm as the number changes to the number 2. He's slimy, creepy, fast and strong. Next to the number 2 is 4 Arms flexes his arms before it changes to the number 3. He's every shape and size. Grey Matter numbed forward before slamming into a glass as the number changed to 4. He's Deku X. XLR-8 runs onto the screen before the number changes to 5. Armed with powers, he's on the case. Upgrade is a blob number, the number 5, as it changes to 6. Fighting off evil from Earth or space. Diamondhead is standing on the number 6 before he is hit by an energy beam as the number turns to 7. He'll never stop till he makes them pay. Ripjaws is swimming next to number 7 before it changes to number 8, with Stinkfly flying above number, cause he's the baddest kid to ever save the day. Ghost Freak floats next to the number 9 before it changes to the number 10 with Heat Blast, who sends out a blast of flames before Izuku is shown punching the ground. Deku X Gwen is shown hitting a mutant bird with a staff. Lucy turns her hands into purple mud-like hammers and slams them into drones. Deku X Max fires 2 kinetronic blasters as Vilgax and Inko pulls out 2 energy pistols. Deku X USA, Washington, D.C. Within a burning building, a woman and her child were trying to make it to the exit as the ceiling gave way to fall in front of the door, stopping the exit. The two of them stepped back before the way they came gave way to the floor below them, so they stayed in the middle of the room. Both mother and child heard cracking above them as they looked up to see their ceiling cracking before falling towards them. The mother covered her son, and they both waited for the ceiling to crush them. But it didn't do that. They looked to see Heat Blast holding up the part of the ceiling that fell through. "I'm here to help," Izuku told them before he sucked the flames into his body. "We have to get the two of you out as the building is going to collapse at any moment," he told them as the boy walked over to him followed slowly by the mother. Izuku led them to the stairs, and the Omnitrix symbol started to flash, not red but green. X, be careful, the building is barely standing, and L is making sure that the building does not fall with you and the other two inside. Izuku heard Gwen through a link to the Omnitrix. "Thanks, C, I'll head for the stairs and get out as quickly as possible," Izuku told her as he helped the woman and her child down the stairs. And just as they reached the bottom step, the stairs gave way. Izuku sucked in more fire, but the floor was crumbling away. Izuku looked around before spotting a window. "Get by me," Izuku told the mother and son as he shot out a stream of fire that cut a hole in the wall around the window. As the window fell, Izuku moved the flames around him, the child and the mother before he had the fire transport them outside as the firefighters arrived. Gwen and Lucy stood outside the rust bucket, with Max standing beside policemen walking with them. The three of them were wearing a full-body, form-fitting black body suits with black gloves. White armor covered their chests and shoulders with white boots and utility belts around their waists. The body suits and armor were too big for both Gwen and Lucy as they were Max's old suits. "X, the police have told us that the ones that set the building on fire are not that far," Max told Izuku, who nodded as the 4 members of the Tennyson family got into the rust bucket and the RV sped off. Lucy and Gwen sat at the table while Izuku stood next to Max as the retired plumber kept his foot on the pedal. "And soon, they found the ones that set the building on fire. It seems that they don't care for the people around them," Gwen said as she looked out the window at the car that they were chasing. "It's how some people are," Max said as he got closer to them as police cars joined them in pursuit of the car of arsonists. They rounded a corner as Izuku moved over to the passenger side window and stuck the top part of his body out the window of the passenger side. He then held his hand out as he narrowed his eyes at the car before sending out a stream of flames that melted the RBB off the wheels. The car of arsonists started to swerve as the rims started to spark across the ground, and the rust bucket slowed down to let the police get the arsonists. The Omnitrix started to flash red before Izuku was de-transformed and sat down, showing that he was dressed in the same cloths as the rest of his family. "Good work, Izuku," Max told his grandson, who smiled at him. "Thanks, Grandpa," he told him as he turned to his granddaughters, "and good work, girls, with how you dealt with the situation," Max told them as the girls smiled at him before they walked into the bathroom to change back into regular clothes. East Side Apartments. A balding man in a brown suit walked up to an apartment with a sign on the side that read, and knocked on the door. "Animo, I know you in there," the man called out as he knocked on the door. "Open up," he called out. After waiting for 2 minutes with no one answering the door, he pulled out a key and unlocked the door. When he opened it, he found that the room was full of terrariums, hamster cages, fish tanks and other types of containers holding animals and plants. The room also had lab equipment, an old couch, and a TV. "Smells like a zoo in here," the man said to himself as the room scent filled his nose. He walked over to a terrarium that hosed a green frog before another man stopped behind him. How did you get in? The man asked the other, as the man in the suit jumped at the sight of the man. The other man had pale green skin, yellowish eyes, and shoulder-length white hair. He was dressed in a dark vest with brown pants, mating-back boots, and gloves, with fingerless gloves. The man's nails were also long and uncut. I have a key, I am your landlord, the man in the suit said as he adjusted his tie. Our former, as you are 6 months past due with your rent, he told his tenant. Well, Roger, all my funds go into my research, he replayed before he pointed to the door. Now get out, you disturbing me, he told him. Name, Roger Blum. Species, human. Quirk, bone plates. Roger can form bone over his arms and legs, giving him harder defense. Looks like you were disturbed long ago, Animo, way before I got here, Roger told him before glaring at the now-named Animo. No, listen, Doc, you and your little fury friends are out on the street if you can't pony up the green, Roger said as he held his hand out. Name, Dr. Aloysius James Animo. Species, human. Quirk, mega mind. Dr. Animo has a large mind that helps develop his research. Phony up, Dr. Animo said with a sinister smile as he turned to the terrarium and pulled out the frog within it. Interesting choice of phrases, he told him as he turned to face Roger. You must be an animal lover, Dr. Animo said as he dropped the frog on the floor in front of Roger. Then you gonna love this, Animo said as he turned to the equipment on the table next to him and put it on, and one was for the head, and one was for the chest. The one on his head looks like a spaghetti strainer, with 2 headphone pads on the sides connecting to a chin strap and 2 horns resembling a rhino. One of the headphone straps has a wire that tethers it to the equipment that he put on his chest, which has a big dial strapped to the center, with the inside of the dial glowing red in the upper half and has a black bottom half, and the dial also has a secondary wire going down to the waist, connected to a walkie-talkie looking device. After putting this on, he turned to Roger, who laughed at him and the equipment. What's that? You a member of the Moose Lodge or something? Roger joked at Animo, who scowled at Roger. This is my DNA transmodulator, phase number 1, Animo told Roger, who rolled his eyes at the man. It creates and accelerates mutations at the genetic level. Observe, Animo said as he reached for the dial on the chest and turned it. Then, it powered up as a high-pitched sound filled the foam as red energy arced around the horns of his helmet before firing beams of the red energy out and at the frog. And when it did, the frog started to change. Its original light green skin turned to moss green with a soft green neck, 2 small horns on its forehead, and 2 bone horns coming from the sides of its head. It has 4 yellow eyes and orange lumps over its body. And by the time the red energy around the frog had disappeared, it was around the size of a large hatchback. The frog then looked at Roger before opening its mouth, showing that the inside of its mouth was dark pink with a spiked olive tongue. Then the frog took Roger into its mouth as the man tried to fight his way out. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Animo said with a creepy evil smile as he looked at the frog that he evolved. Sound like you have a frog in your throat, Animo said before laughing at his own joke. Or is that the other way around, he said before descending into a crazy laugh. The frog spat out Roger and shot him at a wall covered in greenish-brown slime. He impacted the wall and flew into the middle of the room. But Animo did not care as he pulled out a newspaper clipping and looked at it with narrowed eyes. So close to having what is rightfully mine, he said to himself as he looked up from the paper in his hand. Now all I need is a few lousy compounds to finish my work, he yelled before the old TV sounded. Whatever you need from hairspray to state-of-the-art electronics, you'll find them under one roof at the grand opening of the district's newest megamart, the ad said as Animo looked intrigued by it as he narrowed his eyes in excitement. Ah, just what the doctor ordered, he said as he prepared to leave. Megamart car park. The rust bucket drove up and parked as Izuku looked out the window. The new Megamart, Izuku asked his grandfather. We're here for 2 things, Max told him. He both got up as Izuku followed him. The first thing is to buy food, things that you guys like to eat, and some rude that I would like for you guys to at least try once so that when you guys come, plumbers and heroes, you would know what is safe to eat and what is not safe, he told them as they nodded. What's the second thing? Lucy asked him. Max then looked his grandchildren in the eyes. "This place is run by a plumber by the name of Maria Hopkins," Max told them as they nodded and exited the rust bucket. The 3 10-year-olds followed Max as he got a trolley, and the 4 of them entered the store. Izuku, Gwen and Lucy then picked up baskets. The 3 split up from Max as they walked around, and each found something else to buy. Gwen got food that helped brain productivity, so she got some tins of tuna, a bag of her favorite tea, 3 bars of dark chocolate, 2 packs of frozen berries, and a small selection of hard candy. Lucy got sugary treats and decided to get 3 Wonka bars and a large bag of cheese puffs before she went and got the savory stuff like a jar of pickles, a bottle of hot sauce, a pack of frozen burgers, a wheel of cheese, and some vegetables along with a bag of burger buns. Finally, Izuku picked up some cup noodles, a bag of rice, a pack of noodles, a pack of eggs, an assortment of vegetables and meats, a jar of miso paste and a small selection of sweets. The 3 10-year-olds then returned to their grandfather and found him as he was perusing the various tins before he turned to them. "So that's all you want?" Max asked them as Lucy put a hand on her hip. "For this stop," she said as her grandfather smiled at her. The 3 moved the things from their baskets into the trolley, and Izuku returned them. Izuku then started to make his way back to his family, and as he met them, they all heard something getting closer to them. They turned around to see a woman walking up to them, but what drew the eyes of the 3 10-year-olds was that from the waist up, the woman was human, and from the waist down, it was that of a horse. The woman had light brown skin, brown eyes, and shoulder-length brown hair and was dressed in a button-up shirt and black jacket while the hose part of her body was covered in what looked like a horse blanket that acted like a skirt on her, and her horse legs were covered in fur the shade of brown as her hair on her head. "Long time no see, Magister Tennyson," the woman said to Max as she approached them. "It's good to see you, Maria," Max told the woman. Name, Maria Hopkins. Species, human. Quirk, centaur. Maria's lower half is like that of the mythical centaur. Izuku pulled a notebook out of nowhere and started to jot down notes at a lightning-fast speed, with Maria gaining a shocked look at the boy. Or rather what he had on his wrist. "Is that the?" Maria asked as she looked at the watch on Izuku's wrist. "The Omnitrix, yes, and it's the reason why we're here," Max said as Maria raised a brow at him. "Do you have equipment for cadets?" he asked the woman. "Yes, I do." "Wait, you mean that you're going to teach him to be a plumber?" Maria said as it clicked why Max asked her. "Yes, and not just him," Max said as Lucy and Gwen looked at the centaur with brows raised and hands on hips. "And it's not just a plumber I'm teaching him to be, I'm also teaching them to be heroes," Max told the woman, who took a moment to absorb the information before nodding. "I see, and I do have some of the equipment for them," Maria said as Izuku, Gwen, and Lucy smiled, "but I need some time to get it, so if you can come by tomorrow, that gives me enough time to get it," she told Max, who nodded at her before she trotted off as Max looked back at his grandchildren. "Why don't you each one item that you like when you get that training," he said before having a chuckle. "Well, it's going to seem like hell," he told them as they nodded, and they went off once more. Izuku and Lucy did as Gwen stuck with Max as they walked around. Lucy got a magazine while Izuku walked around, trying to find something that would catch his eye. And he found it. It was something for his hero collection. A statue of the American number 3 hero, Batman, and the statue was of the hero standing on a gargoyle with his cape blowing behind him and his utility belt on full display. And so Izuku reached out and picked one of the boxes off the shelf. But before he could find his grandfather, something drew his attention. There were small tremors around him that were getting closer to him. He then turned to the rows of TVs to find that they all turned to static. One of the TVs fell to the floor as Izuku, who hugged the statue close to his chest, dived out of the way before turning to see Animo and his mutant frog. Animo is now sporting goggles with red lenses. Izuku swore under his voice as he knew that he could not go after the doctor with Animo got off his mount to get something off the wall as Izuku started to find his family. Izuku passed 2 security guards as they ran up to Animo before he stopped and turned around to see what was going to happen. "Hey, freeze," one of them yelled out after Animo, who got onto his frog. "Get down off that giant frog and put your hands up," he said as he ran at Animo, who smiled with evilness. The mutant frog jumped over both security guards and Izuku and started jumping through the store. "We have a grab and dash in electronics," the other security guard called out on his radio, "Male, 5 foot, and he's riding on a giant frog or toad, and trust me, you can't miss him," the guard said as the guards ran after him while Izuku ran to where his family was. He was still holding the statue of the number 3 American hero. Izuku ran past Lucy, who was looking at the rows of magazines on the wall. "We have to get to M and C now," Izuku yelled both the code names of Gwen and Max out as Lucy quickly picked up a magazine and she joined Izuku, running to find them. Gwen and Max were in the pet section, with Gwen looking at the hamster in the cage next to her while Max looked over a list in his hands. But Izuku and Lucy did not make it in time. That was where Animo was going as his frog landed behind them. He then turned the dial on his chest as the red beam that shot out the helmet shot out once more and hit the hamster. It grew to the size of a small car, gaining 6 more eyes, and all 8 of its eyes were red, with 3 smaller ones surrounding one larger eye on each side. Its teeth now protrude like fangs, and its ears are clipped in various places. It has primarily brown fur, with the fur on its nose, lower jaw, and torso being tan instead. Animo then shot a beam at the parrot in the bird cage next to the hamster and broke out of its cage. The bird once resembled a Latino cockatiel, but now it resembles a wild cockatiel with a light gray body, wings with pointed feathers, a sharp beak, and orange, almost closed eyes. "Rise to your full potential, my pets," Animo yelled toward his mutated animals. Lucy and Izuku arrived to see Max and Gwen running away from the animals that Animo had mutated. "What kind of pet food are they selling around here?" Lucy asked as they joined Max and Gwen. The parrot and hamster joined either side of the frog that Animo sat on. "Behold the genius that is Dr. Animo," Animo yelled out as the 4 members of the Tennyson family turned around to look at him. "Nothing can stop me from getting what I deserve," he said as Izuku narrowed his eyes at the man. "Mark my words, today I will make history," Animo yelled out as he looked at the Tennyson family members, "or shall I say prehistory," Animo said as Lucy raised a brow at that. "Well then, Dr. Animo, you go no further than this," a male voice called out as the 4 turned to see a man in American football gear walk up to them. "Do not fear, leave this to me," he said as Izuku narrowed his eyes at the man. "Who's he?" Lucy whispered to Gwen, who shrugged at her. "He's the American hero ranked 200, NFL Super Pro," Izuku said as he looked at the hero. "Name, Phil Grayfield. Hero name, NFL Super Pro number, 200 species, human quirk, no damage. No matter what tries to hurt Phil, he will feel nothing and will heal from it if it does not kill him. Now see here, if you give up now, I'll see it as a fair game," NFL Super Pro as he brought his body down in a 3-point stance. "Oh, I think not, Super Fail," Animo called out as the frog shot its tongue out, hit Super Pro square in the chest, and saw him flying. Max just looked down at Izuku and nodded. Izuku then activated the Omnitrix and turned the core to Wild Mutt before pressing the core in and turning it into the orange-furred alien. Then, he jumped at the mutant hamster. Lucy looked at the bird and focused her quirk as the concrete floor moved up in front of her. The golem reached out at the mutant bird as Animo looked at Izuku in wonder. "Simply amazing, transformation on a cellular level and with an ability that is like echolocation," Animo said as both Max and Gwen's eyes shot wide at Animo's breakdown of Izuku's powers. "But know this, you young fools, you cannot stop me," Animo told them as the frog shot its long tongue out and wrapped it around the golem, trapping its arms to its side. The mutant bird then stuck the golem with its beak, and it started to crack. So the frog added preacher, and the golem broke and fell to the floor in pieces. "Now then it's time to turn Washington D.C. into Washington B.C., Animo yelled out as he jumped onto the mutated bird and flew out the skylight. The frog then joined him as everyone turned back to Izuku and the hamster fighting. Izuku started to use the shelves of the store to trap the hamster under them, and once seeing that the hamster was not moving, Izuku, for some reason, moved one of his claws up to the collar around his neck and pressed the Omnitrix symbol. When he did, Izuku turned back to his human form as he shook his head. "That was something," Izuku said as he looked down at the Omnitrix. "How did I know to do that?" Izuku thought as he looked at the alien watch. Maria walked up to them, thank you for saving the store, she told him before looking at Lucy, and you as well, so whatever you want in the store, I'll take it out of the inventory, she told them as Max looked at her before he took the magazine from Lucy and picked up the statue that Izuku picked. Just these, Maria asked him as Max nodded and trotted off as NFL Superpro walked over. And I have to do though never mind then, he was saying before Max showed him his badge, thank you for your hard work, Superpro told them as he walked off to try and find any clue to find Animo. I'll contact Maria later, right now, we have a giant parrot to follow, Max said, and his grandchildren followed him out to the rust bucket. Max turned on the engine as he pulled the RV out of the parking lot and started to drive. Both Lucy and Gwen looked up in the air, looking for the mutat parrot. After a few minutes of driving, Lucy pointed at something in the air. I see Polly, she called out as Max turned to where she was pointing. Now all we need is a cracker that would feed it, Lucy said as Max laughed. I don't think that possible, he told her as he drove faster. Gwen was looking over her laptop to see if she could find any information about the person they were chasing, and she found it. I got him, Gwen called out, and when Izuku got out of his seat, Lucy took it and walked over to Gwen. What does it say about him? He asked her. 5 years ago, Dr. Animo was once a promising researcher in veteran science, but as it turns out, he was doing some genetic experiments where he was mutating animals and tried to give them quirks, Gwen said as she read the information about the doctor, and when he failed to win the Verities Award he went off the deep end, Gwen said as Izuku and the others were shocked by what the red-haired girl said. Max and Lucy kept their eyes on Animo, but when he flew off and over some houses, as Max looked annoyed, we've lost him, Max told his grandkids. He could be going anywhere in Washington, D.C., he said as Izuku narrowed his eyes as the words of Animo went through his head before he looked at his grandfather with wide eyes. I know where he's going, Izuku said as Max and Lucy turned to him, he's going to the Natural History Museum, he said as Max then connected the same dots as his grandson. Well done, Izuku, Max told him as Izuku nodded, and then Max took the first right and made his way to the museum. Hey Izu, Lucy called out the Omnitrix wearer, who turned to her, how did you do that thing with Wildmutt, she asked him as Izuku shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, Izuku said as Max looked at him out of the rearview mirror, as I knew the fight was over and started to think that I needed to be human once more, and then my body started to move on its down and then pressed the Omnitrix, Izuku told her as she nodded. Gwen looked at Max in the diving seat, did you know about this grandpa, she asked him. No, but everything known about the Omnitrix is shrouded in mystery upon mystery, Max said as he drove, and I only know a few things about the Omnitrix. The first is that it can transform the wearer into any alien that has the DNA for within, the second that it downloads the instinct into the wearer's brain, and the last thing is the name of its creator, Max told them as Izuku looked down at the Omnitrix. But I only have 10 transformations, Izuku said as he remembered scrolling through the aliens he had and only found 10. Then that means either that the watch has locked them away or it really only 10, Lucy said as she looked at Max, who nodded at what his granddaughter had said. They soon pulled up to the museum just as the Omnitrix was fully recharged. And around a large hole at the museum entrance were large feathers that belonged to the mutant bird. It seems we're on the right track, good going kiddo, Max told Izuku, who smiled at his grandfather as the four walked into the museum. They were all on edge as they looked around the mad doctor until Lucy held up something that she found on one of the exhibits. It was from Megamart. Once she looked up, she saw Dr. Animo walking around a mammoth skeleton before he looked up at them. You are very persistent, I hate persistent, Animo told them as he fiddled with his technology. We already know about the experiments you have been doing, Dr. Animo, Lucy said as she got ready to shift the ground into a golem. It's over, so please come quietly, Izuku told him. Oh, but you see, it has just begun, Animo told them as Gwen raised a brow at him, you, see, I only needed a few components to push my work into phase 2, Animo told them as Izuku readied the Omnitrix. And what is that? Gwen asked him. The power to reanimation of dormant cells, Animo told him as Gwen, Max, and Izuku looked both amazed and shocked by this. Lucy, on the other hand, looked confused. Do you come with subtitles? She asked him. In other words, breathing life back into what has been long since lifeless, Animo said, telling them as he reached for the dial on his chest, "Observe," he told them as he turned the dial and shot the red beam that fired out of his helmet at the mammoth skeleton. The skeleton started to glow as flesh, muscle, skin, and fur grew over it as its eyes formed, showing a deep red trumpeted its trunk at the Tennyson family. It stomped to them as Izuku readied the Omnitrix to the silhouette with 4 arms. "Behold the genius that is Dr. Animo," the mad doctor yelled out before he ran further into the museum. "You guys get Animo, I'll take the mammoth," Izuku said as he pressed the core in and with a flash, he transformed. The Omnitrix dug itself into Izuku's arm. As his arms began to expand, his eyes became solid green, and his skin turned red. His body grew in size as his hands went from 5 fingers to 4 fingers, muscle also grew as 2 more arms formed out of his sides, giving him 4 arms with whisker-like spikes on each forearm originating on each arm. His hair was pulled into his head, and another 2 eyes formed below his original set as his ears and nose were flattened into his face, and a black stripe formed on his face that goes from his chin to his lower lip. When he was finished changing, his clothes were also changed as he had shoulder pads and knee pads, gray armor under his shoulder pads, black pants along with gold wrist and ankle bands, a pair of black fingerless gloves and 2 golden sashes that went across his chest that had the Omnitrix symbol where the sashes crossed over his chest, and as he had nothing else on his chest, he showed he had tattoo-like stripes on his body. "Let's wrestle," Izuku said in his new alien form as he ran at the mammoth and went for the tusks. As Izuku slammed the mammoth off its side, Max and the others ran to get Animo. As they rounded the corner, they found a caveman exhibit, holding a spear and a giant bird. Gwen pulled the spear out of the caveman exhibit and started to spin it over her head before slamming it on the bird's head as a golem shot out of the ground and nailed a punch to the underpart of the beak. Gwen then spanned around as the bird reeled back, used the spear as a staff, and hit the bird with it, breaking it into bits. After recovering from the hit, the giant bird ran away. Gwen smiled at Lucy. "You and Izu aren't the only ones with skills," she told her cousin as they followed after the mutant bird. After following it, they found Dr. Animo by the Tyrannosaurus fossil, and then he turned to them, activated his equipment, and sent the red beam at the fossil. And like the mammoth, the skin, muscle and flesh started to grow back on the fossil, showing that it had a dark green hide, but unlike the mammoth, it could not grow all of its skin, muscle and flesh back, but as it was leaving parts open to the world, namely on the left side of its head, its spinal column, the underside of its tail and its left flank. And as it came back to life, its eye was the last thing to come back, and it glowed a sinister red as it stepped off its stand as an exhibit and let out a roar at the 3 Tennysons. Back with Izuku. Izuku was hit by the mammoth's trunk and sailed through the air into a wall, destroying it in the process. But he made sure to stay on his feet when he landed. He looked back at the mammoth as the dust settled around him before his fury opponent decided that it was time to charge the alien. But Izuku was having none of that as he ran up and punched the mammoth and moved its head to the side, and then Izuku tried to break one of its tusks before the mammoth used said tusks to both lift him up and then over to another Tyrannosaurus fossil. And he crushed it. Well, that was fun, Izuku thought as he looked at the mammoth as it turned to him. As Izuku slowly got up, the mammoth charged at the red-skinned, 4-armed alien. But that was what Izuku wanted as Izuku rushed forward, took the ancient elephant's trunk in his hands, and started using it like he was doing the hammer throw. He spun around and around, building more and more momentum until his future opponent was a blurring cyclone around him. And then he threw it into a wall like it did to him. "Oh, I'm gonna hurl," Izuku moaned as he rested his lower arms on his knees. Back with Max, Gwen and Lucy, the reviewed Tyrannosaurus swung its tail at the 3 of them as it made its way to the wall with Animo on its back. "I'd love to say, but I need to calm the award that I so richly deserve," Animo told them before the Tyrannosaurus made its way out the building. But then, as Max, Lucy, and Gwen watched the doctor leave, they failed to notice the mutant bird swoop down, and by the time it screeched at them it was too late as it used its claws to pick up both Lucy and Gwen and flew off. "Izuku!" Max yelled out as Izuku ran into the room, and once he saw that both his cousins were not there, he ran out and jumped at the bird. Max talked over to follow but saw a newspaper clipping on the ground, and once he picked it up, he read it over and gained a questioning look. Back with Izuku. Izuku had caught up with the bird and held on to its feathers as its eyes shot wide and looked behind it to see the alien holding tight to its feathers. "No, bye for you," Izuku growled at it as Lucy and Gwen's eyes shot wide, and Lucy's skin turned slightly purple as she started to slip through the bird's grip. And as the sound of the Omnitrix getting ready to turn off, Izuku fell along with Lucy, who had somehow slipped through the claws of the bird. But Izuku caught her as they both fell. Luckily for Lucy, she had a soft landing as Izuku landed on the ground and destroyed the pavement before returning to his human form. Lucy crawled out first with Izuku shortly after. They both looked up in the sky as the mutant bird flew away with their cousin, Gwen, both yelled after her. And as they both looked up, neither saw that Lucy's skin returned to normal as Max pulled up in the rust bucket. And he saw that her skin was slightly purple. "So it's happening already," Max thought as he looked at his granddaughter. "Anyone called for a taxi," Max told his grandchildren. Both 10-year-olds ran into the motorhome as they chased the mutant bird. "Lucy, how did you get out of its grip?" Izuku asked her as Max picked up the speed of the RV. "I don't know," Lucy told him. "I do," Max said as both of them looked over at him. "It's to do with your heritage on your mother's side," Max said as Lucy looked shocked. "Mom," Lucy asked him. "Camille is a lenopan, a species that resembles mud with a purple hue that can shape-shift," Max said as Lucky's eyes shot wide with what he said. "Your mother, Camille, fell in love with my son Joel when he working as a plumber, and they have yet to get married as your grandparents hate humans," Max said as Lucy looked shocked as did Izuku. "Why wasn't I told about this?" Lucy asked quietly. "Your mother and father did not know you would awaken any powers other than your quirk until 3 months ago," Max said as Izuku narrowed his eyes before his eyes shot wide. "The BLD test that Mom did on me," Izuku said as Max nodded. "Yep, I asked Joel, Inko and Frank to do a BLD test on the 3 of you so that we could tell if you would awaken your alien powers from either your mother, in the case of Lucy, or your grandmother," Max said as Izuku's eyes shot wide. "And you found out that Lucy was slowly awakening her lenopan half of herself," Izuku said as Max nodded again. "Did Gwen or I awaken something from Grandma?" Izuku asked him as Max sighed. "I do not know," as Verdona said, "the only thing that makes an anodite is something called the spark, and no, I do not know what that is," Max said as he drove. Washington High Street atop his Tyrannosaurus, Animo stomps around, crushing cars and buildings that stood in the way as they moved across the city. "Ah, I do love my work," Animo said as he looked at the Washington Monument. Atop said the monument was Gwen, as the mutant bird had dropped her off on the top before flying off. "Well, Mom did say use it in emergencies," Gwen muttered as she called Max. "Gwen," Max's voice came out of the speaker when he answered her. "I'm at the top of the Washington Monument," Gwen said as she started to slip, but she took a better hold of the monument and hugged the top pole as hard as possible. "We'll be there as soon as we can," Max said as Gwen held on. After 5 minutes, her arms were torn as her phone fell from her grip. Base of the Washington Monument. Max, Lucy and Izuku ran out just as Gwen's phone fell to the floor and broke. "Gwen will be next," Max said as the sound of a fully recharged Omnitrix filled the ears of the 3. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Izuku said as he activated the Omnitrix, turned to the only silhouette with a wing and slammed the core in. The Omnitrix dug itself into Izuku's arm as his skin turned a brown-green, and his hand became 3 clawed hands. His hair was sekked into his head as his eyes were fused shut, and 4 eye stalks burst out of his head, each side having 2 eyes sails as his head was turning black with a rough skin. Below his arms, another set of legs formed as they were crab-like, and his original legs also turned crab-like. 2 greenish-yellow bug wings with a pointed shape bust out of his back as a black tail grew out with a sharp, stinger-like end. His clothes turned into a white sleeveless jumpsuit with black lining covering most of his body, and the Omnitrix symbol formed in the middle of his head. "A Lepidopteran, good choice," Max said as Izuku flew high up to the top of the Washington Monument. And it was just in time as Gwen was about to fall, so Izuku caught her. "Gotcha," Izuku said as he started to fly down to set Gwen on the ground. "Butterfly?" Gwen asked as she looked up to her cousin, who shook his head. Stinkfly, Izuku said as Gwen gave a slight smile. Thanks for the save, she told him before looking behind them, and as her eyes a slight purple glow, she could see a red dot getting closer, incoming, she said to Izuku as he flew out of the way of the mutant bird that flew past them. Lucy looked up at the bug versus bird aerial battle, and she narrowed her eyes. Not this time, she thought as she called on the earth beneath her feet as a large arm of rock and mud formed out of the ground and aimed for the bird. Arm of Terra, Lucy called out as the arm aided her cousins in the air. Lucy stretched her arm out and moved it as the arm she had formed from the rock and mud swatted at the air around the giant bird. Izuku flew beneath the arm as the bird managed to move out of the way. How is she doing this? Max asked himself before looking at the monument. Lucy, I'm going to the monument to help make sure that Gwen's alright, Max said as the blonde girl nodded, and the elderly man ran over to the obelisk. Izuku moved out of the way as the bird tried to take Gwen off his back. Polly, watch those nails, Izuku yelled out at the bird as Lucy's golem arm swiped at the bird but missed. Izuku blew past the Washington Monument before he rounded it again. One of his eye stalks looked back to see Max breathing hard by one of the windows waving at him. Izuku turned as the bird flew past him. Lucy's golem arm distracted the bird, and Izuku flew at the monument. Are you ready? Izuku asked as Gwen looked at the monument and saw their grandfather there. Yeah, she said as Izuku moved her off his back before catching her in his arms as the bird flew after them again. Izuku flew high above the Washington Monument before descending, and Max held out his arms. That's right, come to Grandpa, he said before Izuku flew past and gave Max his red-haired cousin. Max pulled her in as Izuku dive-bombed before circling over once more as the mutant bird flew straight into the Washington Monument. But Izuku was having none of that as he took hold of the mutant bird and threw it at the ground as Lucy's golem arm held it on the ground. Go, Lucy's got the bird, you stop Animo. Max called out as Gwen nodded. Izuku nodded as he then flew off. Kelly Industries. Within the main building of Kelly Industries, the founder, Dr. Kelly, was giving a tour of his building to two men as they passed his shelf of awards. And here is my Verities Award, Kelly said as he held up a hand to indicate to the prize that looked like a beaker, but was an honor to be nominated for a distinguished award with an amazing group of scientists, Kelly said as he looked back. But the ground started shaking as a large shadow filled the glass ahead of them before Animo and his Tyrannosaurus burst into the building. Kelly looked shocked up at Animo and the dinosaur. Kelly, I think you have something of mine, Animo said as Kelly stepped back from his award shelf, and the mad doctor jumped down and took it off the shelf. I'd like to thank the committee for this honor, Animo said crazily. The Tyrannosaurus stepped up close to Kelly and moved down as it allowed Animo onto its back before trying to bite at the man. But at that moment, Izuku flew it and punched the head of the Tyrannosaurus, so the Tyrannosaurus swung its tail around and tried to take Izuku out of the air. The Lepidopteran flew out of the way of the tail, so Izuku moved forward, making sure that the Tyrannosaurus kept its attention on him. Hey here, you dumb lizard, Izuku called out. You little pest, Animo screamed at Izuku. This is a matter between men, not boys, Animo added as he fired his red beam at Izuku, who flew out of the way of the beam. He flew past Animo and shot greenish slime from his eye stalks at the Tyrannosaurus, sealing its mouth shut, and then Izuku flew in and swiped the Verities Award away from Animo and flew down to hand it to Kelly before flying back up to deliver a right hook to Animo. No, Animo screamed as he recovered and glared down at Kelly before moving his glare over to the alien bug. But Izuku was not done as he flew over to Animo once more and took the helmet off him and, with the strongest throw that he could do, threw it at the ground. My transmodulator, Animo cried out as the helmet met the ground and broke, sending out a wave of red energy. When the energy hit the Tyrannosaurus, its body rapidly aged back to what it was before Animo used his transmodulator on it, and it slowly turned back into a fossil. And with Animo still on, it could not take its weight along with its own and then fell apart into many different pieces. No, Animo screamed as his plan failed. Back at the base of the Washington Monument, Gwen, Lucy, and Max looked at the struggling mutant bird before the red wave shot out and hit the bird and turned back into an average parrot as it flew out of the golem arm that was golding its giant mutated form down and landed on Gwen's arm as she looked at it. Don't even try to kiss up to me now, Gwen told it as it cocked its head to the side as Max smiled down at her and Lucy moved the golem arm back into the ground. Come on, let's find your cousin, Max said as he and his grandkids walked to the rust bucket. They drove over to Kelly Industries, where they found Animo under a pile of fossils that were once the Tyrannosaurus with Izuku still as Stinkfly helping Kelly and the other two men out of the building as Max walked over to them. Well done X, Max told his grandchild. So, X is your name? Kelly asked as he looked at Izuku, who shook his head. No, X is a code name for now, as I am just going through hero training thanks to M here, Izuku said as Gwen and Lucy walked out of the rust bucket. X, we called the police and told them about M's badge so we won't get in trouble, Gwen said as Izuku nodded. Thanks, see, Izuku said before the Omnitrix started flashing, turning Izuku back to normal. After a few moments, sirens filled the air as police cars pulled up, and the police walked over with two men who looked like animals walked over and pulled Animo up. One looked like a lion, while the other was a dog. They dragged Animo over to a police van as a high-commanding policeman walked over to him. Dr. Aloysius James Animo, otherwise known as Dr. Animo, you are hereby given the villain rank of C and are taken into custody. Do you have anything to say? But know that it will be used to gist you in a court of law, the policeman said as Animo looked at him. Name, Dr. Aloysius James Animo. Villain name, Dr. Animo. Villain rank, C. Species, human quirk, mega mind. Dr. Animo has a large mind that helps develop his research. Let me go, you simpleton, that award is mine, and I deserve it, Animo screamed at the man. The man nodded his head as the men led Animo over to the van and placed Animo within before the policeman turned to Max. Are you the one who authorized the one known as X to be a hero when he was both too young and without a hero license? He asked Max, who nodded. And you have a hero badge? He asked as Max pulled it out as the police officer looked over the badge before handing it back. He then looked down at Izuku. I take it you are X, the officer asked him as Izuku nodded. Good, but I have to ask, are you this man forcing you to be a hero? He wondered at Izuku, who shook his head. No, my grandfather has known that I've wanted to be a hero ever since I was 4, and he offered to give me the training I need, Izuku said as the officer smiled. Thank you for the honesty, kid, he told Izuku before turning to Max. Are the other two the same? The officer looked at Gwen and Lucy. Yep, both are my granddaughters, Max said as the officer turned to him, then to Izuku and back again. My eldest daughter is of mixed race, Max said as the officer nodded in understanding. He then touched his ear and pulled out a check, wrote on it and handed it to Max, for stopping the C-rank villain Dr. Animo along with the two perps 2 nights ago. We of the Washington police have been told to give you this check of $2,575,000 for your hard work, the officer told them as he handed the check over. He then walked over to Kelly and allowed Max and his grandchildren to leave. What he did not see was that Izuku had taken the transmodulator. They returned to Megamart and found Maria outside waiting for them. Thank you for coming. Now if you would follow me, Maria said as she turned around and led them into the shop. They walked past employees of Megamart before they reached the supermarket's loading bay and walked over to a wall. Maria filled up a SWCH and input the code before the door opened as the 5 walked in. I'm having a few of the employees take your shopping and gifts, which are for free as a token for saving the store from that man, along with some alien tech that you can get accustomed to using, Maria said before she turned the lights on to show that they were in a room filled with technology from outer space. And here is the new standard issue equipment for the plumbers, Maria said as she put 3 briefcases of the desk. The 3 10-year-olds walked up to the table and, each taking one and then opening it to see that it had a suit in it. These are called Prototech armor that is created by the Galvan for plumbers along with other equipment, Maria told them as they closed the briefcases, and from what I was told by someone Prototech armor can fit anyone, Maria said before the Tennyson family smiled and thanked her before being led out by the centaur and got into the rust bucket and drove off to the text part of their adventure. Deep in space, as the camera moved past the clouds to the rust bucket diving. Kimi to diata no watada no gyuzan jane kore wa unmiai to yabunda on the rust bucket. Gwen and Lucy are playing cards with each other while Izuku is writing in his notebook. Sono hitomi ni atsuru bokutachi ga kagiite rerori uni zudo mitsum Suzuki. Max looked back in the rearview mirror at his grandchildren as a plane flew overhead. Please be dakra moshi kono mun ga with me michi ni mayo hi ni wa mirai hino tobira wa hirite hashiai. As the rust bucket passes, an overhead billboard shows all 10 of Izuku's transformations, dancing with Izuku in front of leading the forms. Ready for the takeoff michi neru sekai hitamai agarunda dakara sono te hanasanade buddy ready for the takeoff yum ga mazasu basho hitsukanda kono kazuna nijirai shimite. They pass another overhead billboard that shows, this time, the other members of the Tennyson and Midoriya families dancing and billboards of moments of each of Izuku's aliens. Like Heat Blast fighting an army of drones, Wild Mutt jumping from tree to tree, Diamond Head firing shards at targets, XLR-8. Running over water, Grey Matter building someone on the table of the rust bucket, For Arms fighting a mammoth, Stinkfly fighting a mutant bird, Ripjaws fighting a man underwater, Upgreet shooting an optical laser and Ghost Freak searing Zomboso. Ready for the takeoff yum ga mazasu basho hite ni shita kono kazuna nijirai shimite. The rust bucket stops at a large field as the four leave the rust bucket and look up to the sky. Chapter 3, The Kraken. It started when an alien device did what it did. Izuku looks at a metal orb with the Omnitrix before it jumps out and attaches itself to his wrist. It stuck itself upon his wrist with secrets that it hid. The Omnitrix core popped up before a silhouette of Heat Blast was shown. Now he's got superpowers. He's no ordinary kid. Izuku presses the core in as dark reddish-brown volcanic rocks crawl up his arm from the Omnitrix. He's Deku X. All 10 of Izuku's transformations are shown: Grey Matter, Ripjaws, Diamond Head, Heat Blast, Stinkfly, Upgrade, Wild Mutt, Ghost Freak, 4 Arms, and XLR-8. So if you see him, you might be in for a big surprise. Izuku, with orange fur covering his body without any eyes, who was slowly turning into Wild Mutt, started to hunch over before slamming the ground with one arm and letting out a roar. He'll turn into an alien before your very eyes. The number 1 is shown with Wild Mutt roaring before he swings his arm as the number changes to the number 2. He's slimy, creepy, fast and strong. Next to the number 2 is 4 Arms. Flexes his arms before it changes to the number 3. He's every shape and size. Grey Matter numbed forward before slamming into a glass as the number changed to 4. He's Deku X. XLR-8 runs onto the screen before the number changes to 5. Armed with powers, he's on the case. Upgrade is a blob number, the number 5, as it changes to 6. Fighting off evil from Earth or space. Diamond Head is standing on the number 6 before he is hit by an energy beam as the number turns to 7. He'll never stop till he makes them pay. Ripjaws is swimming next to number 7 before it changes to number 8, with Stinkfly flying above number, cause he's the baddest kid to ever save the day. Ghost Freak floats next to the number 9 before it changes to the number 10 with Heat Blast, who sends out a blast of flames before Izuku is shown punching the ground. Deku X. Gwen is shown hitting a mutant bird with a staff. Lucy turns her hands into purple mud-like hammers and slams them into drones. Deku X. Max fires 2 kinetronic blasters as Vilgax and Inko pulls out 2 energy pistols. Deku X. Late at night, USA, Maryland, Deep Creek Lake. Over the surface of the Deep Creek Lake, 3 fast-moving objects moved across it. They looked like Yamaha FJR 1300P police bikes, but more streamlined with large vents instead of wheels that shot out air that kept them hovering above the water. Izuku, Gwen, and Lucy were atop each bike, each dressed in a swimsuit. Gwen wore a purple one-piece swimsuit with a light blue diagonal stripe across her torso. Lucy wore a red one-piece swimsuit, and Izuku wore green trunks. Izuku, ease up on the throttle. Lucy, slow down a bit. The 3 heard Max in their ears as they flew across the water. The 2 of them did as told as they started moving across the lake in a haphazard formation. That's good, Max said as they moved across the water. Alright, bring them in, he told them as they moved across the water and over to a bank where Max was standing. After they dismounted and moved the hovering bikes over to the rust bucket, Izuku turned to his grandfather. What are these again, Grandpa? Izuku asked him. These are air bikes, kiddo, and they were made around 100 years back, Max said as he led the bikes over to the trailer that was connected to the rust bucket. And while the air bikes are suitable for people of young age, 10 years is the limit, so tomorrow we'll have some more practice, Max told the 3 of them as they nodded. After the 3 bikes were in the trailer, you 3 go rest for a little while I get dinner ready, Max told them as they walked back to the lake. Lucy smiled as she looked at Gwen and Izuku and started running at the lake. Cannonball, she called out as she jumped into the water. Gwen rolled her eyes at her cousin before looking at Izuku, who was drawing something. What are you doing, Izu? Gwen asked him as she walked over. After seeing the air bikes, I've been thinking that they are only good on the planet and not in space, Izuku told her as she nodded before looking back to Lucy and seeing something getting closer to the shore. And it was a large red shape. Lucy, there's something in the lake, and it's big, Gwen shouted as Lucy rushed out of the lake with Izuku and Gwen got ready. They looked at the lake to see something break the surface. It was massive, and with the darkness covering them, they could not make it out, but they could tell it had something attached to its head. It roared at the 3 of them before diving into the lake, leaving them looking at the lake. Before they ran over to the rust bucket and found Max cooking, Grandpa, the 3 called out as Max turned to them. What is it? He asked them. There's something in the lake, Lucy said as Max saw Izuku and Gwen nodding. Max looked at the lake with narrowed eyes. Could you make it out? He asked them, but they shook their heads. With my Keurig, I know that it's angry, Gwen said as she looked back at the lake with her purple glow eyes, and it's still angry at something, she said as she saw it swimming around the lake. Then that means that someone here is affecting the creature's nest, Izuku said as Max nodded. Tomorrow, we'll look around and find out what's going on, he told them as he returned to cooking as Izuku, Gwen, and Lucy sat at the table. A few hours later, morning the Tennyson family walked towards a small port that was connected to the lake. Now, I was going to teach you 3 how to fish so that when you off-world or in the middle of the ocean, Max said as the 3 nodded at him, but with the creature in the lake 2 of us will be on the lake keeping an eye out in case it attacks while the other 2 will be looking for information around the port, Max said as 3 10-year-olds nodded. The 3 of them held a hand behind their backs as Izuku started calling, Janken Pon, he said as they pulled out their hands, each showing an empty hand. Janken Pon, he said as this time Izuku and Lucy pulled out my hand, and Gwen pulled out a fist. Damn it, the red-haired girl muttered as Max smiled at her. Janken Pon, Izuku said once more as he and Lucy pulled out their hands. Lucy was still going for paper, but Izuku went for scissors. So, I'm taking Izuku fishing while you 2 are going to have a look around, Max said as he looked at both his granddaughters. When you look around, do what you can to not draw attention to yourself and make sure that you are keeping yourself quiet, Max told them. Lucy and Gwen nodded as they walked off to gather information, and Max and Izuku walked up to a boat. Captain Shaw, Max asked as the man on the ship turned to them. Captain Shaw had grayish-green hair on both sides of his head and sideburns, and his chin had some stubble. He is wearing a regular tan fisher jacket, olive pants, and a red baseball cap with a tan rectangle on it. Name, Eric Shaw. Species, human. Quirk, optical view changer. Eric can change his view to see sound waves, heat signatures, or any other type of vision, but he can only use one. Who wants to know? Captain Shaw said as he looked at Max and Izuku. I'm Max Tennyson, and this is my grandson Izuku, Max said as he held up the fishing rod in his hand. We chartered your boat for a fishing trip, Max said as Shaw looked at him. Wasn't there supposed to be 2 more of you? He asked Max with a raised brow. Yes, but they are unwell now, Max lied as Shaw nodded. Alright, get on, he told the 2 of them as Izuku and Max stepped onto the boat. Shaw pulled out of the harbor and started to sail around the lake as Max walked over to Izuku. Now, then, the first thing you do is put your bait on the hook, Max said as he showed Izuku how to do it. Now you try, he told his grandson as Izuku was following Max's instructions. Max then walked over to Shaw. Anything interesting out there to catch today? Max asked as Shaw gained a dark look. More than you can imagine, Shaw said as he turned back to see where he was sailing, but other than that, some bass mainly, Shaw told Max. Izuku sat on the boat, looking into the water with narrowed eyes as he looked around. You see anything? Max asked him, but Izuku shook his head. Not yet, Izuku said as he looked around the lake, but I have to say that the lake is appealing, Izuku said as Shaw laughed. She is a beauty, but she has something within it that has said to have been here for years, Shaw said as he pulled out a pitcher and handed it to Max. who showed it to Izuku, whose eyes widened slightly. "It's called the Kraken," Captain Shaw told them. Max handed the picture back to the man. "For hundreds of years, sightings have been seen of this creature, even before the times of quirks," Shaw told them as Max and Izuku stowed the information away. "Most people think it's a myth but not me, and I know a spot that I personally laid eyes on the beast," he added. "Let's go then," Max said as Shaw nodded with a smile as he turned to starboard and started sailing more to the middle while Max had a look around the wheelhouse. "You seem to have a lot of high-tech equipment," Max said as Shaw nodded. "That's right, sonar, high-def video setup, ultrasound, I got it all, and I will find it," Shaw told him. Before they could go any further, they found buoys with yellow cordon tape in a large arc in front of them. "When did this happen?" Shaw said as Max looked at him. "What do you mean?" Max asked the man. "For the last few days now, people have been cordoning off parts of the lake for no reason before Shaw said before another voice cut him off. "Fishing boat, stop where you are," the voice said as another boat turned up. They turned to see that the man who called out was on the back of the approaching boat. He was tall with tanned skin, a hawk-like nose, and a stern-like face with a dark lining around the eyes, giving him an almost tired look, with short, reddish-brown hair and a spiky goatee. He wore a cyan uniform with black accents, boots with his name, and a logo. "Hello, my name is Jonah Melville. I am the founder of Friends of Fish, and we have closed this lake section for an environmental study," Jonah said to them. Name, Jonah Melville. Species, human quirk, minute miracle. Jonah will have 1 minute where he will gain infinite stamina, an insane healing factor, and increased senses. With him were 2 men. The first was a tall, African-American man with short, black hair who wore black glasses, and the other was another tall, fair-complexioned man with short blonde hair. And like Jonah, they both had a cyan uniform on. "Captain Shaw, you are going to have to turn your boat around," Jonah said to them as Shaw scowled at the man. Shaw looked at the man. "Since you were the one who charted this boat for the day, you decided," he asked Max. Max saw something in his eyes before looking off to the side. "How about we fish somewhere close to here," he said, with Shaw nodding at them. Izuku opened his mouth, but Max shook his head, so Shaw sailed his ship away as Jonah's boat started to return to the dock. After a few minutes of sailing, the sonar started to go off as a large dot appeared on the screen. "The sonar," Shaw said as his eyes widened. "We've found something," he said with wide eyes. Behind the boat, a dark cyan fin broke the water's surface. "Or did something find us?" Izuku asked as the fin saw sink back into the water. "It's the Kraken," Shaw said. A large shadow formed under the boat. Then, it moved off quickly, causing the water to shift under the boat as the 3 people held on and rocked from side to side. Shaw looked up with shocked eyes. "It's heading to the docks," Shaw told them as Izuku and Max's eyes shot wide. "Gwen and Lucy," they said to each other. The docks. Lucy and Gwen were sitting down as they looked over some notes they had made. "The only thing that we could get is that as soon as these Friends of Fish showed up, the waters around here have been acting weird," Lucy said as Gwen nodded as they stood up. "It seems the sun's coming out," Lucy said to a cousin. "Yeah," Gwen said as they walked over to the docks, failing to spot the dark cyan fin breaking the water. A boat's horn started to sound, and that was when Lucy and Gwen looked into the water and saw the fin. "Everyone get away, something is in the water," Gwen called out as people started to rush off the dock as the creature burst out of the water. It was a giant bipedal, dark cyan-skinned creature with an olive underbelly, a slender body with 4 webbed legs, a tail with a fin, and 2 tentacles coming out of its mouth. It had blue eyes, golden teeth, and 6 gills on its neck and front limbs. It had large spikes just below the elbow with smaller spikes protruding from it. It roared at the people on the dock as they ran away with Gwen and Lucy, ensuring they evacuated safely. But before the 2 girls knew it, the creature slammed onto the dock, destroying it. The people still on the dock were sent flying into the water, with Gwen and Lucy being a part of the group that was sent flying. "Back with Shaw, Max and Izuku, I told you about it, didn't I?" Shaw said as he looked at the creature through a pair of binoculars. "The Kraken lives," he said as he looked at Max and Izuku. "Sail before gloating," Max told the man, who nodded as he turned to Izuku. go save them, Max said to the Omnitrix bearer. Izuku activated the Omnitrix as he jumped into the water and turned the core to the silhouette of someone with a skirt and something dangling off its head. Time to go, rip jaws, Izuku said as he took a deep breath, dived under the water, and pressed the core in. And did something that would become an appearance. He transformed as after the green light that encased his body faded away, it showed a semi-armored velociraptor. He had black orbs on his feet, a black tail with 5 blue stripes and bulky claws on his 3 fingers that could only open and close. He wears a black cone-like helmet with a protective visor over his face. He wore a black bodysuit and turtleneck-like shirt with a white stripe on the center and had the Omnitrix symbol on his chest. Izuku got out of the water as the visor slid up into the helmet showing that he had blue skin, green eyes, and black lips with stripes running under and in between his eyes. What, I wanted rip jaws, not XLR8, Izuku said with a high-pitched voice he said before shaking his head and turning to see the Kraken going after the people in the water. Here goes nothing, Izuku said as his visor came down, and he moved through the water quickly. He then picked up speed until he was running on the water. Lucy, you got anything? Gwen asked the girl beside her. No, when I'm in the water, my connection to the land is cut off, Lucy said as they both swam. It's the reason why my powers are at half strength in the rain, water cuts my connection to them, Lucy added as they swam harder. The Kraken gained on both girls, but before it could bite into them, Izuku came in, picked them both up and ran over to the sand bank by the rust bucket. The two of you okay? Izuku asked them as they nodded. Thanks for the save, Gwen said as Lucy placed her hand on the ground, and a giant golem formed. I'll help people out of the water, Lucy said as Gwen nodded, so Izuku ran back off, ensuring he did not kick sand onto them. Izuku ran over to some people that the Kraken tried to take a bit out of, but Izuku saved them with the golem, taking some more people out of the water, and both Izuku and the golem deposited them on the beach. Get us out of here, Jonah told one of his men, who floored it and sped away. The Kraken looked at the boat the friends of fish were using to get away and swam after it. Izuku started gaining on the boat just as the Kraken burst out of the water, stopping the ship. But before the water beast could attack the boat again, Izuku ran in front of it and started running around in a circle. Cyclone shield, Izuku called out as the water turned the cyclone into a waterspout. The Kraken backed off after rebounding off the waterspout and dove back into the water, and Izuku jumped into the boat. They all waited for the Kraken to reserve, and it did, but this time, it was at the ship's bow going after the box on the bow. Jonah's eyes shot wide as his muscles bulged as he dove after the crate that the Kraken had used its tentacles to take hold of. But the Kraken was stronger as it pulled the crate into the water with Jonah. So Izuku sped over to the tentacle and took hold of it as he started to kick up dust and kicked it into the Kraken's eyes. The beast let go of the crate with a roar and went in for another attack, so Izuku sped in once more and then slid on his back with his legs in the air and started to kick the chin of the Kraken extremely fast, making it retreat back into the water. Thanks for the hand and the feet, Jonah said to Izuku, who looked at him, and his visor popped up. What's so important about that crate that you nearly drowned for it? Izuku said as he saw Jonah had bigger muscles than before. Our lunch, Jonah said as Izuku looked at him flat. Before he could say anything, one of the Kraken's tentacles shot out of the water and took the crate from the boat just as the Omnitrix started flashing, so Izuku ran off. Gotta run, he said, going in the opposite direction to the Kraken. He soon reached Shaw's ship and jumped on as soon as he returned to his human form. Shaw took them back to shore before returning to the lake, and Izuku and Max met up with Gwen and Lucy. The four walked over to the rust bucket as people left the area. So what did you two learn? Max asked Gwen and Lucy. For the last year, this group called Friends of Fish came here and has been stopping people fishing for days at a time. For a few weeks now, the lake has been unsafe for people to fish, and the waters around here have been acting weird, Gwen said as Lucy nodded with her. I got the same, but the name of the man in charge, Jonah Melville, Lucy added as Max and Izuku. So we got the same as you two, Max said as he looked over to Izuku, who seemed to think, what is it, kiddo? Max asked him. When I was on the boat with the Friends of Fish, there was a crate that the Kraken was after, and I know that it was not lunch for Jonah and his man, Izuku said as Max nodded, but before they could say any more, Captain Shaw walked over to them. "These stupid fish kissers," Shaw muttered as they walked past them. "Captain Shaw," Izuku asked him. "What is it, Captain?" Lucy asked the man. "The nerve of those enviro punks," Shaw told them before pointing at the lake. "They shut down the whole lake," he told them as Gwen narrowed her eyes and started to think. He then looked back at the lake with narrowed eyes. "No one tells me where to sail," he growled before he looked back at the Tennyson family, "and no one is going to stop me from reelin' in the catch of the century." "Nobody," Shaw said as he walked off to the lake as Lucy looked over to Gwen. "What is it, Gwenny?" Lucy asked as Gwen looked over to Lucy. "You know that I hate being called that," Gwen told the blonde, who shrugged. "Hey, it got your attention, didn't it?" Lucy said with a smile as Gwen rolled her eyes. "So what do you have?" Lucy asked. When Captain Shaw said that the Friends of Fish shut down the lake, Gwen said as her family nodded, "They can't do that on the same day, they can only do that a few days later after they get the go-ahead from the government that is in charge," Gwen said before gaining a look. "I know that look," Max said with a slight smile as his grandkids looked up at him. "It's the same look your grandmother had when she had a crazy yet brilliant plan," Max told them as they all looked at Gwen. "So what's your plan?" Izuku asked her. "Izuku, you go into the lake tonight to find out what is going on under there," she told them as Izuku looked down at the Omnitrix to find that it was still recharging. "Lucy, you make sure that his air bike is not seen, and while you two are at the lake, Grandpa and I will look up Friends of Fish," Gwen said as they nodded. Max pulled out 2 air bikes as Izuku and Lucy went to get changed. They both put on full-body suits that looked like a mixture of a wetsuit and a motorcycle suit with black gloves, and they had thin pieces of armor like shoulder pauldrons, vambraces, BRST plates, knee pads, and thigh and shin guards along with black boots. Over their body were stripes resembling circuitry running over them, giving off a slight white glow. They also had a red dot in the middle of the collar of the BRST plate. Izuku's amour allowed him to have access to Omnitrix. They put on their belts a copper-like metal that went around them with small compartment boxes, and the buckle of the belt was a circular disc-like object marked with a green hourglass. Once they were done changing, Izuku and Lucy stepped out of the rust bucket in their suits as Gwen nodded and smiled. "I can't wait to try mine on," Gwen said as Izuku and Lucy nodded as they had been waiting for this moment. Max smiled at his grandkids as they moved their arms and legs, seeing their range of movement. He could not help but think that he had made the right choice. "Now, from what I could understand, these suits are waterproof, bulletproof, acid-proof and laser-proof," Max told them as they looked over at him. "Now then, I was going to teach you all how to swim like I did when I was in the Air Force, but at this moment we do not have time for that," Max told them as Izuku and Lucy went over to the air bikes before Lucy stopped. "Let's use 1 bike instead of 2, and when Izu is in the lake, I can drive it away if something happens," Lucy said as Max nodded and handed Izuku a diving mask and flippers as both Lucy and Izuku mounted the bike, and Lucy drove off. They reached the shore and found that Captain Shaw was sailing, so they started to follow him. After a while, he stopped with Izuku, and Lucy pulled up next to him. "What are you kids doing here?" Captain Shaw asked them, and both Izuku and Lucy found that he was wearing a green wet diving suit. "Our grandfather, who has the hero badge, allowed us to find out why the Kraken is attacking," Izuku said as Shaw nodded. Izuku put on the flippers and mask and found that the mask was like a display showing a clear view, a heart monitor and how much air he had. Izuku and Shaw both let themselves fall into the water. As Lucy drove away, she found a place to hide and then put on some sunglasses. "What's the water like?" Lucy asked her cousin. "It's good and full of sunken ships," she heard Izuku in her ear. Under the water with Izuku and Shaw swam through the lake as they moved past sunken boats, boxes, and crates on the lake's bed. They both moved past fish, ships, various crates, money, machinery from broken boats, and other equipment. Shaw saw something and stopped as Izuku stopped next to him. He pointed at something as Izuku swam closer to get a better look and saw that it was an egg that looked like a ball the size of a yoga ball. It was brown in color with lighter brown spots and veins covering it. "Lucy, I think I know what has been happening for the last week," Izuku said as Shaw started to swim up. Never mind that we got company, he heard Lucy say. With Lucy was still on the air bike when she saw another boat pull up beside Shaw's, but this one looked high-tech. Shaw swam over to his boat and started to climb up the ladder as men in silver diving suits pulled the man onto the ship. Don't you know that night diving is dangerous? Old timer, one of the men said to Shaw as they threw him on the deck of his ship. That is, of course, you went with someone, he asked Shaw, who scoffed at the man. It was just me, I work alone, Shaw told him as he got up, but two men walked over and took hold of Shaw. One had crab claws instead of hands, while the other had tentacles for hands. We just want some information, the man not holding Shaw said before his voice became serious, such as, what did you see down there, he asked Shaw. Izuku silently surfaced to see what was going on. I saw nothing down there, like always, Shaw told him before the man talking walked over to Shaw with his biceps started to expand before delivering a punch to Shaw's face, knocking out the man. As Shaw fell to the floor, the man who knocked him out pulled off his mask, revealing that he was Jonah Melville. Well, I have to be sure now, don't I, Jonah said as his men dropped Shaw to the ground. Izuku looked down at the Omnitrix and found it was still recharging. Dwayne, Jack, take Ahab here so that we can find out if he was telling the truth back at the cannery, Jonah told them. Name, Duance Tatashori species, human quirk, crab claws, Duance can turn his hands into CRP claws. Name, Jack Ward species, human quirk, tentacle arms, Jack can turn his arms into tentacles. Dwayne and Jack carried the knocked-out sailor onto their boat as Jonah turned around with a tracker in his hands. We'll come back later with a mini-sub to snag the rest of the eggs, Jonah told his men as he threw the tracker into the water and watched as it sank. He then knelt down and picked up an explosive. In the meantime, I just think that his boat got lost at sea, he said as he tossed the explosive onto the boat. After Jonah's boat pulled off, Shaw's ship exploded in an enormous fireball, and Izuku ducked under the water to dodge the flying flaming debris from hitting him. He resurfaced just as the Omnitrix was active once more. Need some help, Lucy said as she pulled up next to him. Izuku nodded as he climbed onto the air bike with help, and Lucy sped after Jonah. I'm going to get Shaw off that boat, but stay close so that I can drop him off with you, Izuku said as he turned the dial of the Omnitrix to the silhouette of Stinkfly. Once you have Shaw, go as fast as you can and get to the shore before heading back to the rust bucket, Izuku said as he stood up and got ready to jump. Are you sure you can do this? Lucy asked Izuku, even though they both knew the answer. Now, Izuku shouted as Lucy launched Izuku in the air. Izuku jumped at the same time, getting a lot of lift, and he then slammed down the Omnitrix and turned into Stinkfly. Lucy turned the handlebar of the air bike, making sure she did not capsize the bike before going after the alien bug. After flying around for a bit, Izuku managed to gain some distance on the boat as Dwayne stuck his head out of the wheelhouse of the boat and looked up. Is that a bird? Dwayne asked the others. Nah, it looks like a plane, Jack said as he looked up as Dwayne returned to the wheelhouse. Jonah narrowed his eyes before shouting, it's the bug we heard about, he yelled out to his men. Man, the harpoons, Jonah told Jack, who nodded and ran to the ship's bow. Jack then started to shoot at Izuku, who weaved through the shots before turning and firing his slime at Jack, sticking him to the bow while Dwayne and Jonah switched pleased, and Dawn started to fire up at Izuku but was soon stuck into one of the walls. Lucy behind them saw barrels starting to be released, so she stopped before getting any closer to them. Be careful, they are planning something bad, she told him as Izuku stayed high in the sky. And she was right to be careful as the barrels started exploding in Jonah's trail. Luckily, neither Izuku nor Lucy were hit by the explosions, but Izuku was struck by the water that soaked his wings, making him lose altitude just as Jonah turned around and started to run over Izuku. But an arm of Terra shielded him as Izuku flew around. The golem's arm did a large snatch and grab as he flew down and picked up Shaw, who was bound with ropes even though he was knocked out. It's time to go, Izuku said as he carried Shaw away at speed, with Lucy riding back to the rust bucket and Izuku following from above. Jonah scowled at the retreating Izuku before hearing something behind him, so he returned to the wheelhouse and sailed away. Izuku and Lucy made it across the lake to the rust bucket was located, and just as Izuku touched down was then the Omnitrix timed out. "Thank the gods," Izuku said as Lucy pulled up next to him with Max and Gwen getting out of the rust bucket. "So what happened?" Gwen asked them as Max started to cut Shaw out of the ropes that he was in. "We know why the Kraken is attacking everyone," Izuku said as Shaw woke up and looked around. "What happened?" he asked them before seeing Izuku and Lucy. "So, did you get me away from them?" Shaw asked the two. "My cousin did," Lucy told him as Shaw nodded at Izuku. "And I'm sorry, Captain Shaw, but I don't think you can hunt the Kraken," Izuku said as Shaw stood up and looked down at Izuku with a clear. "And why is that, lad?" Shaw asked him as Max held back Gwen and Lucy after seeing what Shaw was doing. And Izuku's mind came sharp to a halt. "I'm a fisherman, I need that water, and the Kraken could be a payday that could make me want to retire from this," Shaw told him as every good thing that Izuku had done disappeared from his mind. He forgot about the Omnitrix. He felt useless. He felt like a Deku. Gwen looked at Izuku with her eyes glowing purple, and she saw Izuku become a thick gray aura that practically covered him. "I mean, you're just a kid, how could you stop me?" Shaw told Izuku, who was slowly mentally pulling himself into a shell. For him, the world slowed right down as memories of torment from his former friend played before something came to him. A stronger memory. Something that he buried deep within him. Izuku know this. Izuku heard a voice he knew well in his head. The voice of his father. "While you might not be strong, you do not need to be fast, you need to be you," he remembered his father saying. Gwen saw the gray aura around Izuku gain a pinprick of green that was slowly banishing the gray. "So you want to be a hero, do you? Then you don't have to have a strong quirk or a quirk at all," a different memory played in his head. This one was of Japan's current number 20 hero, Smile Hero, Ms. Joke, on TV. "Quirks don't matter if you are a hero, all that matters is a spirit and will to do what is right," she said while talking about one of the quirkless heroes. Quirkless heroes. Izuku's mind stayed on those two words. Shaw said nothing to Izuku but kept the smile he wanted to form off his face as Gwen saw the green fighting back the gray. The next memory started on the day after Izuku got the Omnitrix and became one of his aliens. "So what are you going to call this one?" Lucy asked him as she looked down at him. "I was thinking that this smart guy shall be all gray matter," he had said in the memory. Then his mind cleared as the memory of taking down Animo came back. Max teaches him the laws that the plumbers follow. Gwen and him playing chess. He dawning with Lucy being a model. Watching Lucy prank Gwen when they first came to the lake. "Know this, Izuku, whatever path you pick, I will happily believe in you no matter what," he remembered his mother saying when he was 6 as his father was given a job on Island. Gwen saw the gray aura become banished as he was wholly green and with many dots of blue. And just like that, time returned to normal for Izuku as he looked up at Shaw with a serious look in his eyes and reached for one of the boxes on his belt. "The Kraken, even though she has just laid her eggs, may be an endangered species until proven other so dash." Izuku was going to say more but Shaw put his hand out. "Oh, I understand," Shaw said as he nodded at Izuku, who looked confused while Max nodded and walked over. "And I already knew that, lad, but so many people around here don't believe, so I just want it to be seen which it has been," Shaw told him as Izuku looked confused. "If I'm right, Shaw is like me, a former military man," Max said as Shaw nodded. "I was a rear admiral, and when I saw what you did on the lake, I knew that you would want to be a hero one day, so when we found the eggs and the no other sightings of them, that does show that the Kraken is an endangered species," Shaw said as Lucy looked confused. "Then why?" she asked him, but Shaw looked at her. "While he does good work saving the people, but he does seem to have some confidence issues," Shaw said as Max nodded. "So used my history with dealing with people and my subordinates from when I was in the Navy," Shaw said as Izuku nodded. "And didn't you want to catch the Kraken?" Lucy asked him, but Shaw shook his head. But not for me, lass, for my son, who is a marine biologist and would like to have the Kraken in a safe place," Shaw told her as she nodded but then saw Izuku. "So, lad, why do you not have any spine and only show it when you change form?" Shaw asked him. The watch gives me my powers as I'm quirkless, Izuku said as Shaw sighed. That makes sense with how you seem, Shaw said as Gwen walked over. Can you tell us what happened? She asked them. Well, lass, after your cousin and I were in there, we found eggs of the Kraken, Shaw said. Her nest will be full of them, Izuku nodded. Then that makes sense why she has been attacking for the last week, Lucy said with Shaw nodding. These friends of fish punks showed up last year when looking for something after the Kraken took out a boat, and then they would sail around the water for days until she started to attack anyone and anything in the water, Shaw told them as they looked at each other. Here's the thing, friends of fish don't exist, they fake, but their leader on the other hand, Jonah Melville, is not a good man, Gwen said as she went to get the information, and when she returned, she showed Lucy, Izuku and Shaw her laptop. Jonah Melville is not a friend to any animal or wildlife. He travels around the world poaching rare animals, crating them up and then selling them to the highest bidder, Gwen told them as Izuku's eyes shot wide. On his ship, the crate that the Kraken took off his boat was one of her eggs, Izuku said as Shaw nodded. That makes sense, lad, Shaw said with a grim look. Do you know where they might be going? Gwen asked as Shaw shook his head. I was out like a light if they said anything, he told her as Izuku's eyes shot wide. They did say something about a cannery, Izuku said as Shaw narrowed his eyes before pouring into the lake. On the other end of the lake, there's an old cannery there, Shaw said as Max walked over. We can take my spare boat, Shaw said as Gwen rushed inside. Or, us two take the boat while these three take their air bikes, Max said as Izuku went to get the other two air bikes out. Gwen came out after a few short minutes in her prototech armor. So the three of them are training to be heroes, Shaw asked as Gwen walked over and got onto her air bike. That's right, Max nodded. Shaw took another look at them just before they rode off in a V formation with Izuku in the middle, Gwen on his right, and Lucy on his left. They missing something to make those suits feel like their hero costumes, Shaw told him as the two walked over to Shaw's boat. What do you mean? Max asked as he got on, and the ex-Navy man undid the morning line. I don't know, but it's something my daughter-in-law told me. She's a hero, you see, Shaw told him as Max nodded at the man. She told my son and me that each time she changed her costume was that it would slowly become what she felt was good for her and her own image of a hero, Shaw explained to him. And you don't think the prototech armor is that? Max asked, but Shaw shrugged. I don't know, but I think it's a good start, he told the ex-astronaut. MC just called the police, and we told them that you have the hero badge and allowed us to act with Jonah and his men, Max heard Izuku in his ear. Thank you, XC, when did they say they will be getting here? Max asked her. They said that they will need to get the right equipment first, Gwen told him as Shaw shook his head. God damn, people not having the equipment ready, he said as Max nodded. Tell me about it, he told the fisherman. The team of 5 soon found the cannery and saw Jonah in an aquatic mech suit holding one of the Kraken's eggs. Hey, be careful of that, or you're going to be cleaning up the world's biggest omelette, they heard Jonah say to one of his men. The group pulled in underneath the cannery, where they found a ladder. You find the eggs, Izuku said as the Omnitrix sounded off as it was recharged. What will you do, lad? Shaw asked with a smile. I'll show them why you don't mess with aquatic-like, Izuku said as he activated the Omnitrix, turned the dial twice, and slammed it down. The Omnitrix and Izuku's arms were covered in gray fish-like scales as his hands became like an alligator with dark green webbing between his now 4-fingered clawed hands as 2 green fins grew on his elbows. His hair tuned into a light green fin as an anglerfish-like lure burst out of his forehead with the antenna being green and the bulb being a lighter green. His neck then started to expand as gills formed on his neck and the bottom jaw began to grow as the teeth became sharp and stuck out of his lips and 2 catfish-like whiskers burst out of his face just above the mouth. His clothes turned into a belt, and a black loin cloth formed out the front and back of him as plates grew out of his chest that looked to be in 5 pieces. Izuku's feet turned to 2-toed feet with green weaving, and just as Izuku's eyes turned into fish-like eyes with a green color to them, just as the rest of his skin was covered in the gray scales and the Omnitrix symbol formed on the belt. Izuku let out a roar and jumped into the water when the Kraken burst out of the water and onto the loading bay of the cannery. Jonah smiled as he looked up at the mother Kraken, bigger the payday, he said to himself as he ran to his aquatic mech suit. Dwayne and Jack started to shoot at the mother, but the shots were doing nothing to her as she moved one of her tentacles, and Dwayne ran into the central part of the cannery. Jack kept firing up at the Kraken, and the mother Kraken swiped one of her tentacles at Jack, sending him flying into the water. Jonah, in his mech suit, swiped the eggs into the air. He smiled as he added the large animal mother and started shooting at her with lasers from his arm-mounted blaster as she crouched down. But she did not need to get any closer as out of the water burst, Izuku moved over the loading bay and landed on Jonah's mech with a savage smile on his face. "If you want to fight a monster, try me," Izuku said as he crawled down the mech's arm, going for the eggs, and Jonah tried to stop him. But Izuku just bit off the laser blaster. Jonah glared at Izuku as the alien managed to get the eggs out of Jonah's grip and dived after them. And just as he caught them midair, Jonah came down and formed Izuku off them, forming the canister that held the eggs to smash on the loading bay and started to roll towards the lake. Inside the cannery the rest of the team was sneaking around before they came to a door where Max and Shaw saw that Duance was getting a bigger gun, so Lucy pulled out 2 stones and then ran into the room and threw the stones at Duance, who looked at the rocks flying at her. "Prometheus gift," she called out as the rocks turned into golems as they clasped onto Duance's face. Jack took that to calm the latter but saw Gwen waiting for him as she delivered a spin kick to his face, knocking the man down. "Good work, lass," Shaw said to Gwen as he tied Jack up and pulled him into the room. It was a good thing as the Kraken's tail burst into the hallway, destroying it. "So that was fun," Gwen said as Max tied up Dwayne. Back with Izuku, Jonah dove for the eggs as Izuku ran after him, but the Kraken stopped Jonah by catching the eggs on her tail. "My eggs," Jonah called out as he went after them and siped them from the Kraken. Izuku jumped on him, taking the eggs from him again and letting them drop into the water. He caught them as he dove into the water. But Jonah did not give up as he had his suit drop into the water after him. As Izuku surfaced with the eggs to give them to their mother, Jonah landed on him, making him drop the eggs. "Rescuing babies, how heroic of you," Jonah said as he started to punch Izuku with the metal arms of the mech suit. He then punched Izuku away, caught the eggs once more, and started to make his way back up to the cannery, but Izuku brushed off the punch and started to swim after Jonah with his loincloth turning into a long black tail with green stripes and green fins. He caught up to Jonah and held onto the glass, but Jonah did a barrel roll, knocking Izuku off him. The humanoid fish alien did not give up as he retook possession of the eggs and held them in his mouth. At that moment, the Kraken mother joined the battle for the eggs and used her tentacles to swipe at Izuku, knocking the eggs out of his mouth and catching them with her tentacles. She then swam back to her nest with Jonah hot on her trail, so Izuku went after him, swimming at his top speed, and Jonah, who had caught up to the Kraken, released a high-relevance blast that forced the Kraken to release her hold on her eggs. And so Jonah zoomed in and took hold of the eggs once more, but Izuku swam at him at high speed and slammed Jonah into the remains of Shaw's sunken boat. Jonah then managed to use a claw attached to his suit to slam Izuku into the ground, but Izuku took the cane that was a part of Shaw's ship to pull the anchor to him to hit Jonah with it. When Jonah let go of Izuku, the alien tried to take hold of the mech suit's arm, but it was soon charged with electricity that shocked Izuku off him, so Jonah started to head for the surface. But Izuku still needed to be finished. He picked up the chain once more and started to spin it around his head, letting it pick up speed before he let it fly at Jonah's suit, cutting off the arms of the mech suit. Izuku pulled Jonah back down just as the Kraken mother took hold of the chain, but Izuku let it go. Jonah stumbled into the water as Izuku rammed into him and took the eggs once more in his mouth. The Kraken mother slammed her claw into Jonah, sending him flying and swam after Izuku, who was heading to her nest as fast as he could. As it reached it, he gently laid down both eggs as the Kraken looked at him with her head ped to the side. Jonah, not quitting, forced his broken suit to get to the eggs. But the mother stopped him with her tentacles and bit into the suit, breaking it and flooding it. Jonah was pulled out of it, and he spread down the mother as he pulled out a small knife. He then went for a strike at the Kraken's head, but his knife broke in, so he used his quirk to make him stronger and swung. But even that did nothing. The Kraken opened her mouth, getting ready to eat Jonah, but Izuku swam before her and shook his head at her. She backed down and returned to her eggs as Izuku turned to Jonah, who gave Izuku a sheepish smile and shrugged, but Izuku started to punch Jonah until the man was unconscious and then swam up to the surface where the police were waiting for them. An officer walked over to see Izuku looking up at them. "Are you X?" she asked Izuku, who nodded his head and handed the man, "Jonah, thank you for what you and your team have made. The payment is with the one called M," she told Izuku, who spotted Max, Gwen, Lucy and Shaw off to the side and swam over to them. Name, Jonah Melville Duance Tadashori Jack Ward Villain Name, Jonah Melville Duance Tadashori Jack Ward Villain Team Name, F.O.F., Flora and Fauna for Outrageous Funds, Villain Rank, C Species, Human Quirk, Minute Miracle. Jonah will have 1 minute where he will gain infinite stamina, an insane healing factor, and increased senses. Crab Claws, Duance can turn his hands into CRP claws. Tentacle Arms, Jack can turn his arms into tentacles. Good riddance to bad rubbish, Max said as Shaw nodded at what he had said. He said before looking down at Izuku, "Are you going to get out of the water?" he asked him. "I would, but I would have a hard time breathing," Izuku told him before a red light started to shine under the water. That was when Izuku got out and turned back into a human as he got onto land. The next day Max had Izuku, and the girls went through drills on the water with their air bikes as Shaw walked over to him holding a book. "They seem to be getting good at that," Shaw said, watching them make tight turns. "They are," Max said before seeing the book. "What's that?" he asked the man. "My only training notes to help these three on the water, so here," Shaw said as he handed the book over to Max, who handed him something. "What's this?" Shaw asked him. "The reward for Jonah and his men," Max said as Shaw looked at the number on the check. "It's to get a new boat," Max told him as Shaw smiled and both men watched the three on the airbikes. But they were not alone as the Kraken swam below them beneath the three. Deep in space, as the camera moved past the clouds to the rust bucket diving. Kimi to Diata no Watada no Gyuzan Janae Kore wa Unmiai to Yabunda on the rust bucket. Gwen and Lucy are playing cards with each other while Izuku is writing in his notebook. Sono Hitomi ni Atsuru Bokudachi ga Kagiite Rerori Uni Zudo Mitsum Suzuki. Max looked back in the rearview mirror at his grandchildren as a plane flew overhead. "Please be Dakra Moshi Kono Mune ga with me Michi ni Mayo Hai ni wa Mirai Hino Tobira wa Hirai Hashiai." As the rust bucket passes, an overhead billboard shows all 10 of Izuku's transformations, dancing with Izuku in front of leading the forms. Ready for the takeoff Michi Neru Sekai Hitamai Agarunda Dakara Sono Te Hanasane Buddy ready for the takeoff Yum Ga Mazasu Basho Hitsukanda Kono Kazuna Nijirai Shimite. They pass another overhead billboard that shows, this time, the other members of the Tennyson and Midoriya families dancing and billboards of moments of each of Izuku's aliens. Like Heat Blast fighting an army of drones, Wild Mutt jumping from tree to tree, Diamond Head firing shards at targets, XLR-8. Running over water, Grey Matter building someone on the table of the rust bucket, For Arms fighting a mammoth, Stinkfly fighting a mutant bird, Ripjaws fighting a man underwater, Upgreet shooting an optical laser and Ghost Freak searing Zomboso. Ready for the takeoff Yum Ga Mazasu Basho Hite Ni Shita Kono Kazuna Nijirai Shimite. The rust bucket stops at a large field as the four leave the rust bucket and look up to the sky. Chapter 4, Permanent Retirement. It started when an alien device did what it did. Izuku looks at a metal orb with the Omnitrix before it jumps out and attaches itself to his wrist. It stuck itself upon his wrist with secrets that it hid. The Omnitrix core popped up before a silhouette of Heat Blast was shown. Now he's got superpowers. He's no ordinary kid. Izuku presses the core in as dark reddish-brown volcanic rocks crawl up his arm from the Omnitrix. He's Deku X. All 10 of Izuku's transformations are shown: Grey Matter, Ripjaws, Diamond Head, Heat Blast, Stinkfly, Upgrade, Wild Mutt, Ghost Freak, 4 Arms, and XLR-8. So if you see him, you might be in for a big surprise. Izuku, with orange fur covering his body without any eyes, who was slowly turning into Wild Mutt, started to hunch over before slamming the ground with one arm and letting out a roar. He'll turn into an alien before your very eyes. The number 1 is shown with Wildmutt roaring before he swings his arm as the number changes to the number 2. He's slimy, creepy, fast and strong. Next to the number 2 is 4 arms, flexes his arms before it changes to the number 3. He's every shape and size. Gray matter numbed forward before slamming into a glass as the number changed to 4. He's Deku X XLR 8 runs onto the screen before the number changes to 5. Armed with powers, he's on the case. Upgrade is a blob number, the number 5, as it changes to 6. Fighting off evil from Earth or space. Diamondhead is standing on the number 6 before he is hit by an energy beam as the number turns to 7. He'll never stop till he makes them pay. Ripjaws is swimming next to number 7 before it changes to number 8, with Stinkfly flying above number, cause he's the baddest kid to ever save the day. Ghost Freak floats next to the number 9 before it changes to the number 10 with Heat Blast, who sends out a blast of flames before Izuku is shown punching the ground. Deku X Gwen is shown hitting a mutant bird with a staff. Lucy turns her hands into purple mud-like hammers and slams them into drones. Deku X Max fires 2 kinetronic blasters as Vilgax and Inko pulls out 2 energy pistols. Deku X USA, Ohio, Route 70, Shadowed Mountain gas station. While Izuku, Gwen and Lucy were inside the gas station getting some ice cream, Max was at the ATM getting some money out when a man pulled up in a 4x4 with a large winch. He was a large man of pale skin with a prominent chin and dark brown eyes and was dressed in large black boots, blue jeans, a light shirt under a dark green jacket and a green cap. Look like there's the next one, Bradley, the man next to him, dressed in blue jean overalls with a blue shirt under it and had short, thinning brown hair. Name, Bradley Wright. Species, human. Quirk, contract reader. So long as Bradley looks at a contract or any legal document, he will know everything about it. That right, Billy, Bradley said as he exited the car. Name, Billy Blum. Species, human. Quirk, surfer. Billy can surf over anything. Bradley walked over to the ATM as Max was done, out the way. Grandpa, I've got a major withdrawal to make, Bradley said as Max walked into the store as the man at the ice cream counter. What do you have that's non-fat with less than 3% sugar? Gwen asked him as Lucy rolled her eyes at her cousin. Napkins, he told her as Lucy giggled. I'll have a butterscotch, Gwen said as the man started to make a cone for her, with Max walking over. Can you stop the men trying to take the ATM? Max asked Izuku, who turned around to see Bradley put the winch hook into it and slam it into the ATM. Izuku ran out and slammed onto the Omnitrix as he ran out of the store. Now, Billy, Bradley called out, not seeing a black blob move across the floor with green stripes. Billy got back into the truck, took hold of the steering wheel and started to press on the gas. But the truck was not. And with each time, Billy, nothing happened before the steering wheel was sucked into the truck's dashboard. Billy looked shocked, but soon the dashboard started to shift and turn black with green stripes that glowed a light yellow that resembled circuitry over it and a ring with the Omnitrix looking back at Billy. Sorry, you are declined, Izuku said in a synthetic voice. Billy was so shocked that he did not react to being shot out of the truck, and a golem came up around Billy, acting as a cage, Persephone's cage, Lucy called out as Bradley turned to them. The large man did not like the odds against him as Izuku pulled himself out of a high-tech truck that turned back to normal when he was out of it. Izuku's form had a black exterior with green stripes that glowed a light yellow that resembled circuitry all over him, along with a green chest and black circuitry stripes over the chest. At the same time, his face was a ring, and his eye had the Omnitrix symbol inside it. Bradley turned around and started running. Do they always run? Gwen asked as Lucy's eye turned slightly purple and another cage golem formed around him. Oh, yeah, Max said as he pulled out a phone, called the police, and explained what was going on. Thank you, Max said to the person he was on the phone to once he was done before turning to the kids. Good work, the police will be here soon, and then we're off, Max said as Izuku walked over. Where are we going? He asked his grandfather as his ring eye glowed as he talked. We're going to see my sister Vera, Max said as Lucy's eyes shot wide and fell to her knees. No, she screamed out as Izuku and Gwen looked down at her. Max was laughing to himself at what his granddaughter was doing. The police came and picked up Billy and Bradley. Name, Bradley Wright. Billy Blum. Villain name, Robber number 1 Robber number 2 Villain rank, species, human, human quirk, contract reader. So long as Bradley looks at a contract or any legal document, he will know everything about it. Surfer, Billy can surf over anything. One of them had the legs of an elephant and walked over to Max. Hello, I'm Officer Woods, and are you the one that allowed the use of quirk use along with the use of a support item? Officer Woods told Max, who nodded as he pulled out his hero badge. Name, Jake Wood. Species, human quirk, elephant legs. Jake's legs are that of an elephant. Once he looked at the badge that Max had, Officer Woods looked over to Lucy, who was still on her knees screaming to the heavens. What's with her? Woods asked Max, who looked over at Lucy. We have to stop off my sisters, and my granddaughter finds her a tad bit boring, Max said as Woods nodded. After the catching and the holding of both these men, the state of Ohio has awarded you this check for a job and thank you, Officer Woods said as he pulled out a check and wrote on it before handing it over to Max. After the police left, Max turned to Lucy with a raised brow. Are you done? He asked her with a smile as she looked at him. Yeah, just about, Lucy told him as she got up, and the four of them walked over to the rust bucket. Izuku pressed the Omnitrix symbol and turned back to normal. As the family drove, Lucy looked out the window as Izuku was putting the metal hook of the winch into a box that held other things. The transmodulator and something that looked like a welding torch. I was the box of evidence they had collected over the few days. We're going quite far, aren't we? Izuku said as he picked up the box of evidence and put it away. When Aunt Vera said she wanted to move away from it all, Gwen said as she washed up and dished in the sink, she really meant it, she added as Izuku nodded. Oh man, this summer was supposed to be about fun, Lucy said as Gwen looked over her with a raised brow, not hanging out in some old lady's place, Lucy Hey, I like Aunt Vera, Gwen said as she looked at her cousin, who looked back before Lucy looked over to Izuku. What do you think, Izu? Lucy asked him as Gwen rolled her eyes at him. She fun, and from what I heard, she was a skilled florist, Izuku said as he walked back with a notebook. Of course, you think like that, Lucy grumbled as she slumped in her seat. Izuku rolled his eyes at her with a gentle smile before turning to Max. What are we going to be learning here? Izuku asked. Gwen nodded. Yeah, he's right, indeed. See, we learned about the equipment we would have and how to care for it. At the lake, we learned how to ride our air bikes, Gwen said as Max nodded. You're right, you are learning something, Max said as he drove before taking a right. Vera has told me that something strange has been going on in her retirement village, Max said as Lucy looked up at him. Really? Lucy asked as she looked confused at him. Yes, she told me that some of her friends have been acting weird for the last week or so and was going to investigate on my own when summer was over, but with things as they are, the three of you are going to go and investigate what is going on while Vera and I are talking and catching up, Max said as Izuku looked up with interest in his eyes. How weird are we talking? He asked him. Vera Tennyson's house, Deer Dragon Retirement Village. Outside a small one-bedroom house stood Vera Tennyson. Vera is an elderly woman with a similar build to her brother, Max. She has gray hair, which reaches down to her shoulders, and she wears earrings and a matching beaded necklace. Vera wore a magenta blouse decorated with a pink tulip pattern, similar to Max's floral shirt, purple shorts, lavender shoes, and a wristwatch. Name, Vera Tennyson. Species, human quirk, lift. Vera can send out a telekinetic wave that can live objects, but the bigger the object, the more strain it puts on her. She was talking to a man with gray hair, gray eyes, glasses closer to his nose, a gray shirt, a brown watch on his right wrist and brown pants. He also had warts on his head near his hair. Oh, Marty, it's been years since the last time I saw Max and the kids with my niece and her son living in Japan, Vera told the man. Name, Marty Edmiston. Species, human quirk, impact absorption. With this quirk, Marty can take in all impacts without hurting himself. I'd like that, Vera, Marty said as he entered his house. He walked over to his couch and put the TV on, and he failed to see something creep into the room. Marty started to eat some corn chips as the thing that crept into his room moved and covered his arm. Marty froze as he looked at it as it encircled his head. "Dear Dragon Retirement Village entrance, can you tell me which house is Vera Tennyson?" Max asked the security guard, who nodded. "Fifth house on the 3rd Street," he told Max. "Thank you," Max called out as the rust bucket pulled off. Lucy looked out the window and could not help but groan. "I know that we have to investigate something, but does this place have to be so boring?" she asked her cousins, who looked at her. "What do you mean?" Gwen asked her with a raised brow while Izuku gave a small smile. "I mean that these people look at grass grow to find entertainment," Lucy told her as Izuku rolled his eyes. "Look, Luke, I know that you will find this boring, but we had to dash," Izuku was saying before the three of them turned to see an old man climb up his house before slipping on the roof. The elderly man then managed to catch himself on the guttering before backflipping onto the pavement without any harm. "Could that be part of his Keurig?" Lucy asked in disbelief. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the elderly man and Gwen and Lucy. He seemed to be taking in everything that the man was for the seconds that Izuku looked at him, but Izuku shook his head. "It's not," Izuku said as the girls looked at him in wonder. "How can you tell?" Gwen asked as she looked at the man. "That man was the former American hero, Red Horde," he told her as Gwen and Lucy looked amazed. "You see that horn? With that he has the quirk of red beam that fired a blast of red energy from that horn," Izuku added before turning back to them seeing the shock on both his cousins' faces. "Wow," Lucy said as she processed the information Izuku had given her. "How do you know this?" she asked him. "When Vera told me that she was looking for a retirement village when she visited Mom and me in Japan," Izuku told her as Lucy raised a brow. "I never heard of Red Horn," Gwen said as she looked at Izuku. "Yeah, he's from Arizona and was ranked 92nd before he retired 3 years later," Izuku said. "Why do you call Aunt Vera, Vera? As we know, that means the same, but you call Aunt Tatsumaki and Aunt Fubuki the same as Gwen and me?" Lucy asked as Izuku scratched his cheek. "Yeah, I just noticed that," Gwen said as Izuku turned to her. "When it comes to using, you use the English word for something, but other than that, you go Japanese like you call Aunt Inko, Mom, not Okasan," Gwen said as Izuku nodded. "Well, I call Mom both Mom and Okasan, but that was from when we were growing up, and you two did not know Japanese that much," Izuku said as Gwen and Lucy nodded, "and for the reason why I don't call Aunt Tatsumaki and Aunt Fubuki, Oba, is because Aunt Tatsumaki told me that being called Oba makes her feel old," Izuku told them. "Ain't she 28, Gwen asked as Izuku nodded as Max had a small laugh. "Yep, that's my daughter," Max said as he looked in the rearview mirror at Izuku, "and let me guess, Fubuki told you the same thing?" he asked Izuku, who nodded. "She's only 23, Lucy said as she rolled her eyes. "Well, she is my youngest. I had 6 children, Max said as his grandchildren's eyes shot wide. 6, Lucy asked as Max nodded. "I know, Auntie Inko, Uncle Frank, Dad, Aunt Tatsumaki and Aunt Fubuki," Lucy said as Max nodded. "That fight, but your grandmother and I had one more child that we called Solana, who is the twin sister to Tatsumaki but is not identical to her," Max said as Izuku narrowed his eyes. "How come we never heard about her?" Izuku asked him. "Your aunt is like your grandmother, an Anodite, and with your grandmother having soiled her, became someone who Max said before pausing, trying to find the right word. "Brat," Gwen gave. "While I might not use that word, yes, and she and your parents are not on good terms as she ruined your parents' wedding Izuku, she always made sure she would drag Frank away, and he nearly did not meet your mother Gwen, and for you, Lucy the less I say, the better," Max said with a heavy sigh. No one said anything before Max found the house before he pulled up outside it. The 4 of them started to make their way out as Izuku shielded his eyes from the bright sun. "Why do old people have to live out where it is so hot?" Lucy next to him as they walked up to the house. Gwen rolled her eyes and walked past her as Izuku looked into Marty's house to see him looking back at him before he moved his neck unnaturally, roaring and then closing the blinds. "Well, that was weird," Izuku said as Max walked up behind him. "Tell me later, but right now, watch your cheeks as Vera is a pincher," Max told him as they heard the door open. They turned to the door and saw Vera walk out as Max walked over and hugged her. "How have you been, Vera?" Max asked her. "I've been good, and I'm happy you're here," Vera told him before turning to the 3 10-year-olds, "and look at you three," she said as she hugged Gwen before moving to pinch her cheeks. "You all grown up now," she said as she moved on to Lucy, who was also hugged and had her cheeks pinched. After a few seconds, she moved on to Izuku and did the same, and once she let go, the 3 started rubbing their cheeks. "Now, you 4, come on in, and I can't wait to chew the fat with you 4, Vera told them as she led them into her house. Marty looked through his blinds before moving away. The inside of Vera's house was filled with antique furniture, pictures of her family, places she had visited, and other types of antiques. Lucy took in the smell of the house before she shook her head. "Who do all old people's homes smell like someone is cooking socks?" she asked as Izuku smiled. "I've got lunch in the fridge getting ready, so don't worry a bit," Vera said as Max's grandchildren turned to her before turning to Max. "Vera is the reason why I have an appreciation for the foods that people find weird," Max told them as the 3 nodded, accepting that they would eat weird food. 1 hour later, after an hour, the 5 sat around the dinner table with a large light brown jelly with dark brown and white bits floating in it. "Now, Vera, this looks delicious," Max said as he looked at the jelly on the table. "Tell me, what are the dark brown bits?" he asked her. "Pork chops, and the white bits are cauliflower," Vera told them as Lucy looked down at the chunk on her plate. "The jello mold was made with pork gravy made," she added as Gwen looked disgusted. Izuku, on the other hand, took a bite of it and found that it did not taste that bad. The texture was something other than what he liked. He turned to his cousins, who looked at him as what it was like with their eyes. "It's alright, but not a fan of the texture," he told them as they ate it. After eating their food and relaxing, Vera turned to the 3 children. "So, you 3, Max told me you're joining him in that space police of his," Vera said as they nodded. "That's right, Vera Oba," Izuku nodded at her. "Yeah, Grandpa said that you told him something strange was happening," Gwen asked as Max hid the hidden smile. "Can you tell us what has been going on?" Lucy asked as Vera looked over to Lucy. "Well, over the past few weeks, people have been acting weird and not themselves," Vera told them as Izuku pulled out a pad and started writing down what she was telling them. "Can you tell us who?" Gwen asked as Izuku got ready. "And weird, how?" Izuku asked as Vera looked at him. "Well, when the sprinklers come on, they just run away from them as if they are afraid of them," Vera told him as Izuku marked that down. "And I only 6 of the people that have been not themselves so far," Vera said as she started listing people as Izuku wrote down the names and where they live. Izuku handed the notepad over to Max, who looked it over. "I think we have a good start, so you 3 head out and have a look and try and find out what is wrong," Max told them as they nodded and got up. When the 3 left, Vera turned to Max. "You already have an idea what is going on, don't you?" she asked him as they both failed to see some olive green slime slip in. "I do," Max told her as he got up to help her wash the dishes, "and this is going to be their first proper encounter with alien life outside of Izuku's transformations," Max told her as Vera nodded as she turned the tap on before the slime slithered away in fear. Outside Vera Tennyson's house, "So we have husband and wife pair Sam and Hallie Fox, Scott Andrews, Alex Roth, Rory Cooper, and Wilo Morris," Gwen said as she read the names. Both Izuku and Lucy nodded. "Yeah, Aunt Vera told us that her friend Rory lived this way just 7 houses down," Izuku said as he activated the Omnitrix. As the core popped up, he turned to the silhouette of what looked like a ghost, then took a deep breath and pressed the core in. The Omnitrix dug into his arm as his back started to hunch forward, and his legs fused together, forming a tail. His clothes and skin merged into one as his head rotated, his eyes fusing into one eye at the bottom and the mouth at the top. His hands became 4 fingers of claws as skin encased his body, becoming gray with black lines running all over him. The Omnitrix symbol peeked out of the skin on his lower left chest. Gwen and Lucy looked at Izuku, who floated there, as they knew that Izuku did not turn into this transformation. He told them that it felt strange and not like the other forms. In this one, he did not feel himself. Case in point, as with this form that he named Ghost Freak, his eye was not green like the others, but it was purple around the pupil, going green for the rest of the eye. You okay, Gwen asked as she used her quirk on his and saw that she was red and dark purple, showing fear. I am, let's just get this done with, Izuku told them as they nodded, and he became invisible and flew with the two of them as they walked down the road to the house. As they walked, they saw some of the residents of the retirement village before Gwen turned to a house with a pie on the windowsill. That's the house of Rory Cooper, Gwen said as Izuku flew over to take a look inside. When Izuku reached the window, he saw Rory Cooper with a fly swatter in hand going after a fly in her home. She had short blonde hair, a blue blouse, and dark cream pants with black sandals covering her feet. And she had a long lizard-like tail. So far, nothing out of the ordinary, Izuku told Gwen and Lucy telepathically. But it seemed that he thought too quickly, as once he was done telling them, never mind what I just said, she somehow stuck herself to the roof to eat a fly, Izuku told them. It could be part of her quirk, Gwen said. No, her quirk is a mutant, Izuku told her as he floated back. How could you tell? Lucy asked him as they moved on to the next house. Her tail, Izuku told her as she looked up to where he was. He looked human, but she did not have anything other than the tail, he told her as she nodded. You and your queer hay ain't that the guy that lives by Aunt Vera, Lucy was saying before as she spotted Marty driving a golf cart with a red rolled-up carpet. Izuku put his hands on Gwen and Lucy's shoulders and turned them invisible before using his telekinesis to lift them up and fly after him. As he drove, one of the sprinklers popped up and started to spray water around, and Marty gained a look of fear as he swerved to avoid the water. Is he the Scott Andrews that Aunt Vera told us about? Gwen asked as Izuku made sure to fly above Marty's golf cart. So, she said that he lived 2 roads across from her. This is her neighbor and the man who roared at us when we arrived, Izuku told her as they soon reached the dumpsters of the retirement village. Marty walked up to one of the dumpsters as his legs expanded, stepped over the gate and walked over to the dumpsters. The invisible three sat outside, getting ready for when Izuku timed out. As it was getting close, they hid and watched Marty move one of the dumpsters out of the way. When the bin was moved, it showed a large trapdoor with a double door under the dumpster, and as Marty reached it, the Omnitrix started to time out, so the 3 moved away just as Izuku returned to normal, and the 3 turned visible. Marty did head 360 and looked behind him, but he saw nothing, so he opened one of the doors and walked down the stairs, not seeing Izuku, Gwen, or Lucy looking at him. We have to tell Grandpa, Gwen said as Izuku and Lucy nodded as the 3 left and walked back to Vera's house. So what have we got so far? Lucy said as they returned. Well, from what we saw, Vera-oba's neighbor has hydrophobia, Izuku said as Lucy looked confused. Have a fear of water, he explained as she nodded. Don't you have that? Gwen asked, but Lucy shook her head. No, I like water, but I can't really use my quirk in water as it makes the earth too heavy to lift and stay as a golem, Lucy told her as Gwen nodded. After talking more about what they found, they saw Max standing outside the rust bucket, and he was talking into his badge. I know, Patellidae, but could you check for me, he said as he saw his grandkids walk over. Sure thing, Max, and does this mean you're coming out of retirement? They heard as Max's badge flashed. It does, and I'm training 3 new members, Max said as he smiled at his grandkids. Oh, will I be looking into it for you, Patellidae out, the voice said as the badge stopped flashing. Who was that Grandpa? Lucy asked him. That was one of my many former partners, Magister Patellidae, who is the same species as Ripjaw's Apisxis valen, Max told them before leading the 3 into the rust bucket. So what did you find? He asked them. We only could investigate one name on the list, but someone else caught our attention, Izuku said as Max nodded. It's Aunt Vera's neighbor, Gwen said as Max turned to her and looked confused. Marty, he asked them as they nodded. Yeah, he drove down to the rubbish collection area and was bringing a rug with him. But when he reached the dumpsters, his legs stretched out, and he walked over the gate, and when the sprinklers went off, he was afraid, but of the sprinkler, Lucy said as Max rubbed his chin. It was the water, wasn't it? Max asked as they nodded. And that's not Marty's quirk. Marty has impact absorption, Max said as he looked troubled. It seems that you 3 are on your first alien case, Max said as the 3 looked amazed. Really? Gwen asked with a tiny bit of excitement in her voice. Could it be the same species that Mom and I are? Lucy asked him, but Max shook his head. Why? She asked. Lenopan do not have hydrophobia, but I do know a species that does, Max said as they looked at him. They are called the Limax, and they are from the planet Nitromorph, and they are very xenophobic to beings that come from 3 plants, those are Earth, Koros and Terradino, Max said as the 3 nodded. So why are they here? Izuku asked as Max shrugged. I don't know, but I do know that it can't be anything good as the Limax are carnivorous, and I do not want to know what they are doing with the people that they are replacing, but we need to act now, Max said as Izuku and the girls nodded as they walked over to Marty's house. Max knelt at the door and pulled out something that Gwen raised a brow at. You're going to break into his house? She asked him. There are times when I was on active duty when you had to do this type of thing to save the day and help people, Max said as the others nodded, and when you do, you have to learn when to do this and why it is needed, Max said as he unlocked the door. Will you teach us that? Lucy asked as Max nodded. I will, he told her as they walked in. Now look around for anything that seems out of place or something that does not seem right, Max told them as the 3 swept through the house. I got spilt chips in the living room, Lucy called out from the living room. I have where the rug was taken, Gwen said from the hallway. Resent disturbance from the drain, Izuku said as he looked in the sink in the kitchen. Max said nothing as he looked around before nodding. Alright, tonight we're going to go and see where Marty was going and find out what is happening here, Max said as his grandchildren nodded, and they all walked out of the house. Vera Tennyson's house. Vera's bedroom. Vera was lying on her bed as she felt that her energy had gone before, and she did not see the olive-green smile from before once more. But there was no water this time to scare away the smile. It slithered over to Vera's hanging arm before making its way up her arm and then started to wrap around her. The slime then moved off her, took the shape of Vera, and turned into her. So, the famed Max Tennyson is here, the copy of Vera said as they lifted Vera up and left. Late at night the 4 members of the Tennyson family snuck out of Vera's house in their uniforms, with the kids wearing their Prototech armor and Max wearing his old plumber gear. They saw the residents of the retirement village walk around before they had as they heard something. Is the food supply ready for transport? They all turned to see Vera walk up to Marty, Rory, and 2 dark-skinned people. It looks like they got Vera, Max said with narrowed eyes. The pods are in the final stage of GSTTN, but something about the young ones does not sit right with me, Marty told her as Vera nodded. They are the grandchildren of Max Tennyson, Vera told them as each elderly person hissed inhumanly. I see, we're going to have to do something about them, Red Horde asked as Vera gained a dark look. Further down the road Max and the kids silently went down the road as 2 old people played shuffleboard. There it is, Izuku said as he nodded at the dumpsters. And all we have to do is follow the stench, Max said as the 4 walked over, not seeing that the elderly people were watching the 4 members of the Tennyson before they let out hisses as they started to shoot the pucks at them. I'm all for a game of shuffleboard, but this is hockey, Max said as the 4 dodged the pucks flying at them. The pucks started to hit the walls, breaking into bits, not before leaving dents and cracks in the wall. Now, where are you 3 heading? The 4 turned to see Vera walk over to them as Max moved a large rifle from his shoulder and aimed it at her. I know you, not Vera, Max said as he pulled the trigger, and a small jet of water shot out. The face Vera rolled out of the way as the 4 continued running until they reached the gate with the dumpsters. Lucy, Gwen, open the trapdoor while Izuku and I are going to hold them back, Max called out to his granddaughters, who ran towards the bin. Max aimed at the fake residents while Izuku activated the Omnitrix and slammed it down. The Omnitrix dug itself into Izuku's arm as orange fur grew over his body, and his eyes fused shut. Izuku's body was hunched over, becoming more canine as his lips became black and yellowish, and black claw-like nails came out of his now 4-fingered hand. Around his neck, a dark teal and black collar with the Omnitrix symbol formed, and gills opened on his neck before he let out a roar. Max quickly looked at Izuku before shooting more blasts of water as Izuku ran forward and swiped at the fakes. As Max and Izuku were fighting, Lucy called up 2 large golems. X gets out of there, Gwen said as the golems lifted the dumpster and threw it at the fakes, making them fly back. But they did not see some olive slime on the Omnitrix that flashed yellow for a while before returning to the usual green. "We have to get down there now," Max called out as the two golems passed Izuku and Max and started to make sure they could get down the trapdoors. "C, L, you both get on X, and he'll take you down while I go down the ladder," Max called out as he made his way to the ladder. Izuku hunched down to let both his cousins on his back as the golems formed a wall. "What you gonna call this one?" Gwen asked as she looked at Lucy, who raised a brow. "You always names for your attacks," she told her. "This was not an attack," Lucy said before screaming the last part as Izuku jumped down the trap door leading to a large cave. Izuku jumped from wall to wall, skidding down a tiny bit of one side. Max was not that far behind them as his boots were rocket-propelled as he floated down next to them before turning to Lucy. "How long do you think that your golems can hold them?" Max asked before they heard a loud breaking sound, followed by some hissing. "Not that long," Lucy said as they started to run into the cave. As they ran, Gwen spotted some green liquid on some of the cave's ceiling. They then stopped at a fork in the road. "This is not good," Max said as he looked down at both tunnels that they were next to but did not see what way to do. "X, can you tell which way to go?" he asked his grandson, who started to use his gills to take in the air around him before taking off down the tunnel on the left. "I think this cave system is under the entire village," Gwen said as Max nodded. "I think you're right," Max told her as they ran into a cavern filled with green slime, and it was at that moment that the Omnitrix started to flash as Izuku headed for a barrier and rammed into it at full speed, breaking it apart as he turned back to human. The three then-year-olds appeared in another cave filled with green slime and started looking around. "What do you see?" Max asked as he stepped into the cave. "I don't see anything," Lucy said as she looked around. "I know I picked up a scent in here," Izuku said as he walked forward with the others following behind him. They continued walking forward until they found a large open area filled with green pods and a spaceship. Max narrowed his eyes at the ship before nodding. "That's a Limax, level 4 food carrier ship," Max told them. The four then made their way down the cave wall, taking in the sights of the cave. "Put on your visual scanners and take pictures of these so that I can send them to the Galactic Courts," Max said as the three of them pulled out the sunglasses like a thing as put them on and as they walked round, that would tap the side taking a picture. "It's like everyone in the retirement village has been podded up," Gwen said as Max started to count the number of pods. "What are they in?" Lucy asked as Max finished counting the pods. "Gwen's right, they have everyone from the retirement village here, and the pods are called GSTTN pods that allow for something to be put in them for eating, and they are normally used on animals," Max said as Lucy looked sick. "We're going to have to get everyone out," Gwen said as Max nodded. "You're right, but we also have to make sure that everyone wakes up in their homes first," Max said as Izuku looked at him. "When we get the linemen off the world, and I have a full charge, I can use XLR-8 to get them back into their homes," Izuku told them as he started to reach for one of the pods. "I wouldn't do that if I was you," they heard the fake Vera say as they turned to see them walking up with the other fake residents. "Well, you, not us," Lucy said as she got ready to summon some golems. "Oh, but we will be soon," the fake Marty said as all the fakes changed into semi-translucent humanoid blobs made up of some olive-green liquid with dirty pink-colored organs that were on site along with 3 red eyes and sharp yellow teeth. Max aimed his water rifle at the 3 Limax walking towards them. Gwen also moved a water rifle off her shoulder and aimed at the Limax. Lucy got ready to summon some golems until she backed up and pressed on the spaceship. It opened a door, and they saw inside. And it had more pods within. "It seems that the pods have been marinating long enough," the Limax in the middle told the other two, who were about to move, but the sound of a fully charged Omnitrix filled the air. "You really burn me up," Izuku said as he turned to the silhouette of Heat Blast before slamming it in. Reddish rocks formed from the Omnitrix as it dug into Izuku's arm. The rock moved up his arm and started to cover his body. His hands became 4-fingered, and his feet had a slight oval-like shape with 2 toes and 1 back toe. Flames then burst out, making his hair as his hands and feet became yellow plasma. And the Omnitrix symbol formed on his chest. And now I'm going to return the favor, Izuku told them as he gathered flames in his hands and shot a blast of fire. But as the flames washed over them, it did nothing to the Limax, who stood there. All the Limen then jumped together and started to merge into one giant being. Whatever you are, human or Pyronite or Vulpamancer, you just made a terrible mistake, the fused Limax said as he continued to grow and grow. Us Limaxes live for the heat. Why do you think we came to the desert in the summer? It asked Izuku as it was then fully formed. Why couldn't Azimuth allow for a water-using alien to be on the first 10 transformations? Max MMM as Izuku started rolling out of the way of the giant's rentals. What are we, Lucy? Gwen was saying before seeing Lucy walk forward as mud started to fall from her arms. And when they got a good look at her, they saw that her skin and eyes were slightly purple. Rise of Jormungandr, Lucy called out as the mud on her arms mixed with the earth beneath her feet as a golem formed. But not the typical golem that they have been seeing. No. This golem was that of a giant snake. Go, get the people off the ship, I'll help X, Lucy said as her snake golem reared its head before going after the giant Limax. The giant Limax turned to Gwen and Max, and before it turned its back to them, it shot 2 of the Limax out of its back. Gwen saw the 2 coming after them, so she turned to Lucy. Lucy, Gwen called out as she took her gun and tossed it to her blonde cousin, who took it in her hand before she started to shoot at the mixed Limax. She took the gun from the air and aimed it at the Limax, and when she shot out 2 large blasts of water that hit both Limax, they melted them. X, there's a pipe above you, Lucy called out as Izuku looked up and saw a large pipe above him. Izuku gathered flames in his hand, shot up at the pipe, and started to melt a large holt. You missed me, the giant Limax told Izuku before an enormous rush of water burst out of the pipe and onto the Limax. The Limax started screaming as it began to melt. The snake golem slithered around, opened its jaws, and swallowed the Limax before closing it. Max and Gwen finished getting the pods off the ship as Lucy sent the serpent golem into the spaceship. Max pulled something out of his belt before he left the spaceship. Sorry, Earth is not a drive-thru, Max called out as the door closed and the ship blasted off. X, it's time to put these back, Max told Izuku as the Omnitrix wielder slapped the Omnitrix on his chest and turned into XLR-8. Izuku sped over to Vera's pod and pulled her out before rushing off and going to Vera's house. Izuku then rushed back and collected the next person before speeding away. This continued for the next few minutes until they were all back in their house, and then Izuku returned and brought his grandfather and cousins back to the village before timing out and turning back to human. But once more, something got onto the Omnitrix, and some purple mud was coming off Lucy's arm and made the Omnitrix flash yellow for a little bit before becoming its normal green once again. Well, this night was good, but it's time to get to bed, Max told them as they returned to Vera's house. A few hours later, the top bunk of the rust bucket Izuku slept as he was dressed in green and black pajamas with green bottoms, and his shirt was a green stripe in the middle with a white 10 and green stripes on the sides of his shirt. As Izuku slept, the Omnitrix dial started to turn until it turned to the selection feature that showed a silhouette of a humanoid slime with lime arms. It was of Limax transformation before it turned to show a silhouette of something with 2 long arms and a long body. It was a Lenopan transformation. But they were not staying on the active list as the Omnitrix dial turned left 2 whole rotations before turning right 3. Once that was done, the dial started turning, showing just the 10 silhouettes of Izuku's original 10 forms before the Omnitrix faceplate returned to the hourglass. Deep in space, dark system, edge of the Milky Galaxy, Xenon on a planet with a green HEW within a lap stat, in front of the large screen stood. The one that stood about 5 inches tall and had an anthropomorphic gray frog, with gills and sticky skin, bulbous green eyes, angular black pupils and eyelids that open and close horizontally and 4 thin tendrils grew out of his lower jaw, while 2 longer ones grow out of his upper jaw, giving him the appearance of having a beard. He was dressed in a dark green jumpsuit, with a lighter green intergalactic symbol of peace logo on his chest and bronze-colored platings covering the base of his neck, shoulders, and wrists along with a belt of the same color surrounding his waist, and he had yellowish-green eyes. "This is interesting," the being in front of the screen said as he looked at the screen. the user that has my Omnitrix has somehow gained new DNA from the Limax and the Lenopan DNA, he muttered as he looked at the screen. He then pressed some buttons on his keyboard and showed a list of the active list of transformations. The active transformations are the DNA samples of Pyronite, Vulpomancer, Petrosapien, Kinoceleran, Galvan, Tetramand, Lepidopteran, Galvanic Mechamorph, Pisxis Valan, and Ectonurite, the creature said before they looked at one of the samples, and it seems that the DNA that Myax had gotten from the Ectonurite appears to be playing up as there is some interference from the DNA donor, and it seems that its Z-Scare is trying to take control, he said as he studied the screen. He moved his hands over the keyboard before he stopped and turned the screens off. If he returns, it's not my problem, he said before he walked away. Sol System, Planet, Earth, Japan, Shizuoka Prefecture, Mizutofu, Midoriya family apartment. Within a small two-bedroom apartment stood a woman with large and circular eyes that looked like Izuku's with the same color. Her hair was also green, but a darker shade, and it was straight and shoulder-length, with a small and spiky ponytail at the back. She was slightly overweight and dressed in a white shirt, salmon jumper, and short, knee-length blue skirt. Her name was Inko Midoriya. Name, Inko Midoriya ne Tennyson species, half-human half-anodite quirk, attraction of small objects. Inko can summon small objects to her, and when she is angry, the small bones within the human body count. Inko was on the phone with her husband. But her face showed no happiness. "What are you saying, Hisashi?" Inko asked her. "Inko, it was not what you think," her husband told her as Inko rolled her eyes. "I'll send you the info, but it's really was not my fault," Hisashi told her as an email on her computer appeared. Inko looked at the email, and her eyes widened. "What the foo dash?" Inko started saying. "Yes, this is I can't what?" Inko asked into the phone as she looked at the screen before shaking her head. "So we now have a daughter?" she asked, confused. "Yes," Hisashi said to his wife, who stayed quiet before shaking her head. "I have to ask you," Inko told her husband. "Sure, Inko, what do you need?" Hisashi asked her. "Do you remember what my dad and my job was?" Inko asked him over the phone. "Yeah, you both were space police, and you got me that meteor for my birthday 2 years after Izuku was born," Hisashi told her before asking her, why. "Izuku has joined them and has something to call the Omnitrix, and from what my dad told me is that it has attached itself to his wrist, Inko. Helmet to provide outlines for his face, which are his eyes and mouth, and his feet are hooved. The second resembled a fiddler crab with a goldish-brown colored armor, a sideways mouth, for side-like legs and a giant, powerful pincer for a left hand. It had orange lines running over their body, and eyes had the same color as the highlights on the pincer. The last one was in a shiny gray bodysuit and a black helmet resembling a pillbug, with a small green triangle visor on the front. "Begin the audition," the voice of Vilgax called out. Mechadroids filled the room as the one in purple armor rocked over to them before pulling out a blaster. They then shot down 3 of the Mechadroids as another moved closer and shot a beam back at the one in the armor. It then rolled out of the way of the laser and held its arm up as a small rocket tower popped up on its arm before firing a rocket at the Mechadroid. The one in armor pulled out a grenade and tossed it over to a bunch of Mechadroids, and it bounced off one of the Mechadroids and then exploded. The one that looked like a crab jumped with its claw, destroying a Mechadroid before gripping another and throwing it at another. Another Mechadroid flew over to them, and the crab caught the Mechadroid flying at it before crushing it. Then, it pulled a sword and cut through a Mechadroid flying over to it. The roof opened as an attack Mechadroid fell into the room. The one in the shiny gray bodysuit pulled out a translucent crystalline hardlight hoverboard. They flew over to the attack Mechadroid, which raised its arm and fired a giant laser at the crab and the one in purple armor. The laser encased the one in the bodysuit, and when the attack Mechadroid was still hovering there without any damage done to them. The one in the bodysuit flew forward, punched their way through the droid's chest, and landed on the other side as it blew up. A hologram of Vilgax appeared above them, and the 3 looked up at it. "Impressive, you all hired," he told them as they saw the hologram change to the Omnitrix. "Your objective is to retrieve the Omnitrix," Vilgax told them. "The one who succeeds collects the reward," Vilgax said as a door opened, and the three walked over to it. Do not disappoint me, he told them as the door closed, and the three found that they were sitting in a pod. The pod was then shot from the Chimeran hammer, heading to Earth. Earth, North America, USA, New Mexico, off Route 70. Max looked at his three grandchildren as they were dressed in workout clothing. Gwen and Lucy wore leggings, with Gwen wearing dark blue leggings while Lucy wore red and white sports bars. Izuku wore dark green shorts and a white shirt. All three of them, though, had on black sneakers. Now that we have this area, we can start with your training, Max told them as they nodded at him, and the first thing we're going to do is push-ups, and I want you all to do 20 push-ups, Max told them as they each got down and started to do the push-ups. So, Grandpa, what are we doing today? Lucy asked as she did her push-ups. After you are done with the push-ups, the three of you are going to be moving on to target practice with your blasters, Max said as he watched them. Does that include my DV Defender? Izuku asked as he reached 5. Yes, Vera gave me the schematics for your DV Defender, Max told him with a nod. Are we going to be doing this every day? Gwen asked him as she reached 9. Each day, we are going to be doing a different type of work, with today doing strength training, and then tomorrow we are doing aerobics before moving on to the next workout, Max told them as they reached 11, then, after each workout we are going to go through all the laws of the galaxy, Max said as they reached 13. What else are we going to be doing today? Gwen asked him as she went down for her 14th push-up. Yeah, so what's today? Lucy said as she had come up from her 15th. Well, after target practice, I'm going to set a course up, and Izuku is going to turn into Diamond Head and train in more target practice, Max said as they all reached 16. Lucy, you going to see if you can start using your Lenopan powers to see if you could awaken them as they are slowly awakening, Max said as Lucy stopped to nod before going down for her 19th push-up. And for you, Gwen, I want you to meditate while both your cousins are training, and when they are done with their training, you are done with your meditation, Max told her as she nodded. The three finished doing their push-ups. Now then follow me, he told them as he walked over to a table that he had set up that had Izuku's DV Defender along with 2 other blasters. They are the size of normal handguns with a curvy shape as they blend in from the arrow-pointed barrel to the handle encased by the trigger. On the side of them was an hourglass connected to a small dial on the top. Now, here are your chrono blasters, Max said as Gwen and Lucy picked up their blasters. Izuku, you do have a chrono blaster, but for this, we're going to use your DV Defender, Max told his grandson, who nodded. All right then, when you're going up first and this little thing here is going to shoot off a target that I want you to hit, Max said as he patted a small round box next to him. Gwen nodded and picked up her chrono blaster. Now turn the dial on the top clockwise, once for stun, twice for blast and 3 times for a constant beam, Max told them as they nodded at him. Gwen walked up. Turn it twice, Max told her as Gwen did as told and readied herself. Max said nothing but pressed a button on a remote as the round bot opened, and a disc-like hologram shot out, and Gwen aimed before firing a shot. A burst of a blue laser shot out of the chrono blaster and flew through the air. The laser missed the target as Gwen was early on her shot. Let's try that again, Max said as Gwen retook aim. Max sent another disc out, and Gwen fired once more. She was still late this time but got better as she nearly hit the target. One more shot, then we move on to Lucy, Max said as he got ready to send out another disc as Gwen waited. And waited. Max set the disc loose. Gwen tracked it with her eyes and aimed. She fired. She was too late. Don't worry, Pumpkin, Max said to her as she nodded and put the blaster down, and Lucy walked up to her blaster and took aim. Max sent out a disc as Lucy shot her laser and missed it. Max looked at her with a raised brow as she was too early. Have a little patience, Mac.